What if Luffy never ate the Gomu Gomu fruit? What if instead he bit into something way more dangerous, the human-human fruit model? Saiyan? Dude, think about it. Saiyan powers are literally game-breaking. We're talking about a race that gets stronger from getting beat up, can go Super Saiyan and multiply their strength by 50, and throw energy blasts that can crack planets. Now imagine that insanity mixed with Luffy's unbreakable spirit and his knack for turning enemies into drinking buddies. But here's the twist. What if that power came with a dark secret? What if Luffy's abilities were artificially created by some mad scientist, and now there's a whole conspiracy of artificial Saiyans trying to capture him? Picture Luffy fighting cyborg celestial dragons, sharing his golden aura with his entire crew, and proving that friendship really can save the world. If you're hyped for this wild ride, hit that like button and let's jump in. 10 years ago, Fuchsia Village, the bar smelled like spilled beer and old wood, just like it always did. 7-year-old Monkey D. Luffy sat on his usual stool, legs dangling as he watched the red hair pirates celebrate another successful voyage. His eyes were glued to Shanks, who was in the middle of telling some wild story about a sea king the size of an island. And then, Shanks waved his arms dramatically, this massive beast comes charging at us, mouth open wide enough to swallow our ship whole. No way, Luffy shouted, nearly falling off his stool. What you do? Well, little anchor, I'm not little, Luffy puffed out his cheeks. And I'm gonna be a pirate too, I'm gonna be even stronger than you guys. The pirates burst into laughter. Lucky Roo slapped his knee while chomping on a chicken leg. But you can't even swim, kid. So what? I'll get a devil fruit and then I'll be super strong. Shanks grinned and ruffled Luffy's hair. Devil fruits are rare treasures, kiddo. You can't just find one lying around. But as fate would have it, there was one lying around. Sort of. Makino had just brought out a fresh plate of food when one of Shanks' crew members, Yasopp, pulled out an ornate wooden box. Hey Captain, what should we do with this thing? Been sitting in storage for months. Inside the box sat 2 fruits. One looked like a purple melon covered in swirls, the Gomu Gomu fruit they'd stolen from a government ship. The other was different, smaller with a golden skin that seemed to shimmer, marked with strange spiral patterns that almost looked like hair. That's the weird one we found on that deserted island, Ben Beckman said, puffing on his cigarette. Still haven't figured out what it does. Shanks picked up the golden fruit, turning it over in his hands. Human fruit model, Saiyan, never heard of this model before, he frowned. The guy we took it from was ranting about warrior blood and legendary power before he passed out. Saiyan, Luffy's eyes went wide. That sounds cool, like a warrior. Easy there, Anchor, devil fruits aren't toys. This one especially, something feels different about it. But Luffy wasn't really listening anymore. The golden fruit seemed to call to him somehow. Without thinking, he grabbed it from Shanks' hands and took a massive bite. The taste was indescribable, like lightning and starfire all at once. Power coursed through his tiny body as he swallowed, and for a moment his black hair flickered with golden light. Luffy, Shanks shouted, but it was too late. The boy collapsed, his small frame convulsing as energy unlike anything in the world flooded his system. When he finally stopped shaking and opened his eyes, they held a depth that hadn't been there before. Not quite the same innocent sparkle, but something more intense. How do you feel, kid? Ben asked, kneeling beside him. Luffy sat up slowly, flexing his fingers. He felt incredible, strong, like he could punch through a mountain. I feel awesome. To prove his point, he threw a playful punch at the air. A small burst of golden energy shot from his fist, blasting a hole clean through the bar's wooden wall. Everyone stared in shocked silence. Whoa. Did you guys see that? I made a punch beam. Luffy grinned, completely oblivious to the panic on the adults' faces. Shanks grabbed Luffy's shoulders. Listen to me very carefully, Luffy. You can never let anyone know what fruit you ate. Not the Marines, not other pirates, nobody. This power, he glanced at the hole in the wall, it's more dangerous than any treasure in the world. Why? It's awesome. Because, Shanks' voice was deadly serious, there are people out there who would do anything to get their hands on power like this. Promise me, Luffy, promise me you'll be careful. Little Luffy nodded solemnly, not really understanding why everyone looked so scared. All he knew was that he felt amazing, and he was definitely going to be the strongest pirate ever now. Present day, Alvida's ship 10 years had passed since that day, and Monkey D. Luffy was finally ready to begin his adventure. At 17, he'd grown into his power somewhat, though he still didn't fully understand what he was capable of. His body was naturally stronger than any normal human's, his reflexes were incredible, and when he got really excited or angry, strange things happened. Right now, he was standing on the deck of Iron Mace Alvida's ship, grinning like he didn't have a care in the world. "So you're telling me," Alvida glowered down at him, her massive iron club resting on her shoulder, "that you sailed out here in a barrel?" "Yep, though I kinda fell asleep and got lost." Luffy scratched his head sheepishly. "And you're not afraid of me, the most beautiful pirate on the seas?" "Beautiful?" Luffy tilted his head, genuinely confused. "You're just really fat and ugly." The entire crew gasped. Nobody talked to Alvida like that and lived to tell about it. "What did you say?" Alvida roared, raising her club high above her head. "I said you're fat and—" Luffy started to repeat himself, but then he noticed a pink-haired boy cowering behind some barrels. The kid looked terrified, and something about seeing someone that scared made Luffy's blood start to simmer. The club came crashing down. Luffy caught it with one hand. The sound of metal meeting flesh should have been followed by the crunch of breaking bones. Instead, there was just a dull thud. Luffy's hand hadn't even moved. The massive iron weapon that could crush boulders was completely stopped by his bare palm. "That's not very nice," Luffy said, and his voice had taken on a different quality. Still cheerful, but with an undertone that made the pirates step back instinctively. "You shouldn't pick on people weaker than you." Alvida stared in shock. "Impossible. Nobody can stop my club bare-handed." "I can." Luffy's grip tightened on the weapon, and the iron began to bend. "And you're scaring that kid over there. I don't like bullies." With seemingly no effort at all, he crushed the club into a ball of twisted metal and tossed it aside. Then, faster than anyone could follow, his fist shot forward. Punch beam! A golden blast of energy erupted from his knuckles, slamming into Alvida and launching her clear off the ship and into the distance. She disappeared with a tiny ding sound, just like in the old stories. The remaining pirates stood in stunned silence. Their captain, who had a bounty of 5 million berries and had terrorized the East Blue for years, had just been defeated by a single punch from some skinny kid. The pink-haired boy emerged from behind the barrels. "Are you okay?" Luffy turned to him with his usual bright smile, the intense aura from moments before completely gone. "I'm great, I'm Monkey D. Luffy and I'm gonna be king of the pirates. What's your name?" "K. Kobe," the boy stammered. "Thank you for saving me. How did you do that?" "Do what?" The energy beam." "And you caught her club like it weighed nothing." Luffy shrugged. "I ate a devil fruit when I was little, makes me really strong." He decided not to mention the specifics. Shanks had made him promise after all. "A devil fruit?" Kobe's eyes went wide. "Those are incredibly rare and valuable. The Marines would—" "The Marines?" Luffy's expression darkened slightly. "What about them?" "Well, they hunt devil fruit users, especially powerful ones. The world government wants to control all devil fruit abilities." Kobe paused, realizing he might be saying too much. "Not that I support that. I actually want to join the Marines, but to help people, not hurt them." "You want to be a Marine?" "That's cool. Everyone should follow their dreams." Luffy grinned and started looking around the ship. "Hey, do you guys have any food? I'm starving." As Luffy rummaged through the ship's supplies, Kobe watched him in fascination and growing concern. The power he'd just witnessed was unlike anything he'd ever heard of. Devil fruits were supposed to give strange abilities, turning you into rubber, or letting you turn into animals, or controlling elements. But this raw strength, the energy blasts, the complete lack of effort in defeating Alvida, this was something else entirely. "Luffy," Kobe said carefully, "what kind of devil fruit did you eat?" Luffy looked up from a crate of apples. "Oh, it was called the human fruit or something. Model, Saiyan, I think." Shanks said it was really rare. Kobe frowned. He'd read every book about devil fruits he could get his hands on, dreaming of the day he might encounter one. Human fruits were Zoan types that let you transform into different human variants, but he'd never heard of a Saiyan model. "What does it do exactly?" "Makes me super strong and fast. And when I get really mad or excited, sometimes weird stuff happens." Luffy bit into an apple. "Wanna see?" Before Kobe could answer, Luffy closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his hair started to move slightly, even though there was no wind. A faint golden aura began to shimmer around his body. "Whoa," one of the remaining pirates whispered. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Shut up," their temporary leader hissed. "Don't make any sudden moves." Luffy's power was building, but he wasn't transforming fully. He was still learning control, still figuring out how to access his abilities without losing himself to them. What Kobe was seeing was just a glimpse, like watching the surface of an ocean and trying to imagine its depths. The golden light faded, and Luffy opened his eyes with a satisfied grin. "Pretty cool, right? Though I can't do the really big stuff yet. Shanks said I need to be careful." "Shanks," Kobe blinked. "Red-haired Shanks, the Yonko? Yep, he's the one who gave me this hat." Luffy touched the straw hat on his head fondly. He's gonna be so surprised when I become Pirate King. Kobe felt like his worldview was crumbling and rebuilding itself every few seconds. This cheerful, seemingly innocent boy had just demonstrated power that could rival some of the strongest Marines he'd heard about. And he'd gotten it from one of the 4 emperors of the sea. Luffy, he said slowly, I think you might be in more danger than you realize. Danger? Luffy tilted his head. Why? Because, Kobe looked around nervously, the world government has been looking for unusual devil fruits, especially ones they don't understand if they find out about your power. Let them come, Luffy declared confidently. I'm not scared of some stuffy government guys. Besides, I've got to start my crew and find the One Piece. His complete lack of concern was both admirable and terrifying. Kobe realized that Luffy genuinely didn't understand how extraordinary his abilities were or how many people would kill to possess them. Where are you headed next? Kobe asked. I need to find a swordsman for my crew. I heard there's someone really strong being held at a marine base nearby. Roro no Azoro, I think. The pirate hunter, Kobe paled. Luffy, he's incredibly dangerous. They say he's killed dozens of pirates. Sounds perfect for my crew then, Luffy laughed. Want to come with me? You could see the marine base. As they sailed away from Alvida's defeated crew, Kobe couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed the beginning of something that would change the world. This boy, with his mysterious power and unshakable optimism, was going to cause waves that reached every corner of the Grand Line. He just hoped the world government wouldn't catch wind of it too soon. Behind them, one of Alvida's pirates was already dialing a Den Mushi, whispering frantically into the receiver. Sir, we need to report an unusual devil fruit user. The power signature was unlike anything we've seen. Golden energy blasts and incredible physical strength. The user is heading toward Shell's town. On the other end of the line, in a sterile laboratory deep within Marine headquarters, Dr. Kaizen smiled as he listened to the report. After 10 years of searching, his creation had finally surfaced. Understood, he said calmly. Continue surveillance. Do not engage. I'll handle this personally. The hunt for the Saiyan had begun. Shell's town Marine base captain, Axe Hand Morgan, was having a very bad day. First, his statue had a bird dropping on its face. Then his breakfast was cold. And now some pink-haired kid was standing in his office, rambling about unusual devil fruit users. So this pirate, Kobe continued nervously, he defeated Iron Mace Alvida with a single punch. And there was this golden energy. I don't care about some nobody pirate. Morgan slammed his axe hand on his desk. Do you see this base? Do you see my statue? I am the law here. But sir, the power I witnessed was… Silence, Morgan's roar echoed through the room. You want to be a Marine? Then learn your first lesson. I don't care about pirates, devil fruits, or energy beams. I care about order, my order. Kobe deflated. This wasn't how he'd imagined his dream of joining the Marines would start. Outside in the courtyard, tied to a wooden post, Roro no Azoro was getting increasingly irritated by the sound of Morgan's shouting. 3 weeks of this treatment was testing even his legendary patience. His stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten since yesterday when some little girl had tried to sneak him food. Oi, a cheerful voice called out. You're Roro no Azoro, right? Zoro cracked open one eye to see a teenager in a straw hat climbing over the wall like it was nothing. The kid dropped down into the courtyard with surprising grace, landing without making a sound. Depends who's asking, Zoro replied warily. I'm Monkey D. Luffy. I'm gonna be king of the pirates. The boy grinned widely. I want you to join my crew, not interested. Zoro closed his eye again. I've got my own goals. What kind of goals? I'm gonna be the world's greatest swordsman. Luffy's grin widened. That's perfect. The future pirate king needs the world's greatest swordsman on his crew. Did you not hear me say I wasn't interested? But something about the kid's confidence made Zoro look at him more carefully. There was something different about this one. Most people who saw him tied up either ran away in fear or laughed at his predicament. This Luffy character seemed completely unfazed. Why are you tied up? Made a deal with that bastard Morgan. I'd stay here for a month without food and he'd let some kid go free. That's noble of you, Luffy said, and his voice had lost some of its cheerfulness. How long has it been? 3 weeks. Luffy was quiet for a moment, studying Zoro's face. The swordsman looked exhausted, dehydrated, but his eyes still burned with determination. There was strength here, not just physical, but the kind of inner strength that refused to break no matter what. I like you, Luffy declared. You're definitely joining my crew. I told you, Luffy. Kobe came running into the courtyard looking panicked. You can't be here, this is a marine base. Hey Kobe, I found my swordsman. That's Roro no Azoro. The demon of the East Blue, he's killed dozens. He doesn't look like a demon, Luffy interrupted, tilting his head. He looks hungry. When's the last time you ate? 2 days, Zoro admitted grudgingly. Without hesitation, Luffy reached into his pocket and pulled out one of the apples he'd taken from Alvida's ship. He tossed it to Zoro, who caught it awkwardly with his bound hands. Eat up. Can't have my swordsman starving. I'm not your swordsman, Zoro said, but he bit into the apple anyway. The sweetness hit his system like a drug, and he had to fight not to devour it in one bite. What is going on here? Captain Morgan burst into the courtyard with a squad of Marines, his axe hand gleaming in the sunlight. Behind him, Kobe looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. Oh hey there, Luffy waved cheerfully. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, are you the guy in charge? Morgan's eye twitched. I am Captain Morgan, this is MY Base and you are trespassing. Cool. I'm here to recruit Zoro for my pirate crew. The Marines gasped, Kobe made a strangled sound. Even Zoro raised an eyebrow at the kid's casual admission. Did you just confess to being a pirate? Morgan asked slowly. Yep. Gonna be king of the pirates. Morgan threw back his head and laughed. A scrawny kid like you, king of the pirates, you can't be serious. I'm totally serious, Luffy replied, and something in his tone made the laughter die in Morgan's throat. The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop a few degrees. Luffy's usual cheerful demeanor was still there, but underneath it, Zoro could sense something else. Power. Raw, barely contained power that made his instincts scream warnings. Sir, one of the Marines whispered to Morgan, maybe we should. Shut up, Morgan snarled. I'll handle this brat myself. He raised his axe hand high. Nobody makes a fool of Captain Morgan. The axe came crashing down toward Luffy's head. Luffy caught it. Just like with Alvida's club, the massive weapon stopped cold against his palm. But this time, Zoro was close enough to see the details. The kid's arm didn't even strain. There was no sign of effort whatsoever. It was like the axe had hit an immovable object. That's not very nice, Luffy said, and his grip tightened. The metal began to creak under the pressure. Morgan's eyes widened in horror as he realized he couldn't move his weapon. What are you? I'm a pirate, Luffy said simply. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he sent Morgan flying across the courtyard. The captain hit the wall with a sickening thud and slumped to the ground, unconscious. The Marines stood frozen, unsure whether to run or fight. Anyone else want to cause trouble? Luffy asked pleasantly. They all shook their heads vigorously. Great. Luffy turned back to Zoro, who was staring at him with a mixture of respect and wariness. So about joining my crew. What the hell are you? Zoro asked bluntly. I'm Luffy. That's not what I meant. Zoro's voice was serious. I've seen strong people before. Hell, I've fought some of the best swordsmen in the East Blue. But that wasn't normal strength. Luffy scratched his head sheepishly. I ate a devil fruit when I was little, makes me really strong. Which devil fruit? Human fruit model Saiyan, Zoro frowned. He'd heard of human fruits before. They were supposed to let you turn into different types of humans, but he'd never heard of a Saiyan model. What's a Saiyan? I'm not really sure, Luffy admitted. Some kind of warrior race, I think. All I know is it makes me strong, and sometimes when I get really mad or excited, weird stuff happens. Before Zoro could ask what weird stuff meant, there was a commotion from the town. Screaming, explosions, the sound of buildings collapsing. What now? Kobe whimpered. A Marine came running into the courtyard, panic written all over his face. Captain, the town is under attack. It's Buggy the Clown, Luffy's expression darkened. He'd heard of Buggy, a pirate who terrorized innocent towns for fun, the kind of person who gave pirates a bad name. Untie him, Luffy said, nodding toward Zoro. But sir, he's a dangerous criminal. Untie him. The command came out with such force that the Marine immediately scrambled to cut Zoro's ropes. As feeling returned to his arms, Zoro studied Luffy carefully. The kid's whole demeanor had changed. The cheerful, carefree attitude was still there, but underneath it was something harder. Something that reminded Zoro of the edge of a perfectly sharpened blade. My swords, Zoro said. Where are they? Morgan's office. Kobe, can you show him? Luffy was already walking toward the town, his hands clenched into fists. Luffy, wait, Zoro called after him. You don't know how many enemies there are. Doesn't matter. Luffy's voice carried clearly across the courtyard. They're hurting innocent people. And with that, he took off running toward the sounds of destruction. Orange Town minutes later, Buggy the Clown was having the time of his life. His crew had the pathetic little town surrounded, the mayor was cowering in his house, and in a few minutes, they'd have looted everything worth taking. Kabaji, Moji. Burn it all down, he cackled, his detached hands gesturing wildly. I want this place to be a message to every town in the East Blue. Nobody refuses to pay tribute to the great Captain Buggy. The destruction was methodical and cruel. Buildings that had stood for generations were reduced to rubble. The few townspeople who hadn't fled were hiding wherever they could, terrified for their lives. It was into this chaos that Luffy arrived. He stood at the edge of the town square, taking in the scene. Burning buildings, terrified civilians, pirates laughing as they destroyed everything these people had worked to build. Something inside him snapped. Hey! Luffy's shout echoed across the square, somehow audible over the roar of flames and the sounds of destruction. Buggy turned, his permanently grinning face splitting even wider when he saw the teenager in the straw hat. Well, well. What do we have here? Some kid playing hero. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, Luffy said, and his voice was completely calm, deadly calm. And you're going to stop this right now. Or what? Buggy laughed, sending his detached hand flying toward Luffy with a knife clutched in its fingers. Luffy caught the hand casually, his grip tightening until Buggy yelped in pain. Or I'll make you stop. That's when it started. It began as a faint golden shimmer around Luffy's body, barely visible in the firelight. But as his anger grew, at the destruction, at the fear in the townspeople's eyes, at the sheer senseless cruelty of it all, the light grew brighter. Zoro arrived just in time to see it happen. He'd retrieved his swords and run through town as fast as he could, following the trail of destruction. But what he found in the town square made him stop dead in his tracks. Luffy was changing. His hair, normally jet black, was starting to lighten. Not all at once, but in flickering waves, like someone was painting it with liquid gold. His normally cheerful brown eyes had taken on a greenish tint, and they were burning with an intensity that made Zoro's instincts scream at him to run. What the hell? Buggy stared in shock as golden energy began to crackle around Luffy's body like lightning. What kind of devil fruit is that? I told you. Luffy's voice had changed too deeper, more resonant, carrying a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the square. I ate the human fruit, model, Saiyan. His hair was fully golden now, standing up in spikes that defied gravity. The energy around him had formed a visible aura that made the air itself seem to vibrate. And you, Luffy continued, raising one glowing fist toward Buggy, just made me really angry. Zoro had seen some incredible swordsmen in his time. He'd fought opponents who could cut through steel, who could move faster than the eye could follow. But the power radiating from Luffy right now was on a completely different level. This wasn't just strength. This was like watching a natural disaster take human form. Impossible, Buggy screamed, launching his entire body at Luffy in a desperate attack. I'm Buggy the Clown, I'm immune to cutting attacks. I've got a 15 million berry bounty. I don't care, Luffy said simply. He moved so fast that even Zoro's trained eye couldn't follow it. One moment Buggy was flying through the air, all his body parts ready to attack from different angles. The next moment, Luffy was standing behind him, one glowing fist extended. Saiyan punch. The golden energy that erupted from Luffy's fist wasn't like the small blast he'd used on Alvida. This was a concentrated beam of pure power that caught Buggy's scattered body parts and slammed them together with tremendous force. The pirate clown went flying, not just across the square, not just out of town, but so far into the distance that he became a tiny speck before disappearing entirely with a barely audible ding. His crew took one look at where their captain had been, then at the golden-haired figure standing in the town square, and decided that discretion was the better part of valor. They ran, but the transformation was taking its toll. Luffy swayed on his feet, the golden glow flickering like a candle in the wind. His hair began to fade back to black, and the intense look in his eyes was replaced by exhaustion. Luffy, Zoro ran forward just as the kid collapsed. He was still breathing, but he was completely unconscious. Whatever that transformation had been, it had drained him completely. Is he okay? Zoro looked up to see a young woman with orange hair approaching cautiously. She was beautiful, but there was a calculating look in her eyes that put him on guard. Who are you? Nami, she replied, still staring at Luffy's unconscious form. I'm a navigator. I was in town when this happened. She paused, studying Luffy's peaceful face. What was that? That transformation? I have no idea, Zoro admitted. He said something about a devil fruit, but I've never seen anything like that before. Nami knelt down beside Luffy, checking his pulse. It was strong and steady, but his body temperature was elevated like he had a fever. He saved the town, she said quietly. Yeah, he did, And you're his friend, Zoro considered that. Crewmate, apparently. Though I haven't officially agreed yet. Crewmate, Nami looked up sharply. He's a pirate, says he's going to be king of the pirates. Nami's mind raced. She'd been tracking pirates across the East Blue for months, stealing their treasure and trying to build up enough money for her own goals. But this was different. The power she'd just witnessed was unlike anything she'd ever heard of. Pirates with that kind of strength didn't stay in the East Blue. They went to the Grand Line, where the real treasures were. When he wakes up, she said carefully, tell him I want to talk to him. About what? About joining his crew. Zoro raised an eyebrow. You saw what he can do, and your first thought is to join him. Nami smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I saw what he can do, and I realized he's my ticket to the kind of treasure most pirates only dream about. What she didn't say was that she'd also seen the way he'd collapsed after using his power. Whatever that transformation was, it came with a price. And in her experience, people with that kind of strength, but also that kind of vulnerability, were either very dangerous or very useful. Maybe both. As Luffy slowly began to stir, his first words were, "Did we win?" "You obliterated them," Zoro said dryly. "Good." Luffy sat up with some difficulty, still looking drained. "Are the townspeople okay?" "They're fine. Actually, they want to throw you a party." "Really? Awesome. I'm starving." Just like that, Luffy's usual cheerful demeanor was back, as if he hadn't just demonstrated power that defied all logic. But Zoro noticed the way his hands shook slightly as he stood up. And Nami noticed the way his eyes kept darting around the square, as if he was worried about something. The transformation had scared him too. "Hey," Zoro said as they walked toward where the grateful townspeople were setting up a celebration. "That thing you did back there. The golden hair thing?" Luffy looked uncomfortable. "Shanks warned me about that. Said it was dangerous." "How so?" "I don't really understand it, but every time it happens I feel like I might lose control, like the power might be too much for me to handle." Luffy paused. "And afterwards I'm always really weak." "Maybe you need training," Zoro suggested. "Learn to control it." "Maybe," Luffy brightened up. "Hey, that means you're joining my crew, right?" Zoro sighed. After what he'd witnessed today, he was starting to realize that following this kid might be the most interesting and dangerous thing he'd ever done. "Yeah," he said finally, "I'm in. But I've got conditions." "Name 'em." "First, I still plan to be the world's greatest swordsman. If you ever get in the way of that goal, I'll cut you down myself." "Deal." "That's exactly the kind of ambition I want on my crew." "Second," Zoro continued, "if you're going to have that kind of power, you need to learn to control it. I won't follow someone who might accidentally level a town because he got too excited." Luffy nodded seriously. "I'll work on it, I promise." "And third," Zoro glanced at Nami, who was still following them with that calculating look in her eyes, "we need to be careful about who else we let join. Power like yours is going to attract attention, not all of it good." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Zoro said quietly, "that transformation of yours, that's not just a devil fruit ability, that's something else entirely. And if word gets out about it..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood. In a world where the world government controlled everything, where Marines hunted down anyone who posed a threat to their authority, a power like Luffy's would make him a target. But as they walked into the celebration, surrounded by grateful townspeople and new friends, Luffy couldn't bring himself to worry too much about the future. After all, he was going to be king of the pirates. And now he had a world-class swordsman and a clever navigator to help him get there. What could go wrong? Marine headquarters, 3 days after Orange Town Vice Admiral Garp was having his morning donuts when the report landed on his desk with a thud that shook his coffee cup. The file was marked Urgent Devil Fruit Anomaly in bold red letters, which was never a good sign before breakfast. "Let's see what's got Sengoku's panties in a twist this time," he muttered, flipping open the cover. The first thing he saw was a photograph, grainy and taken from a distance, but clear enough. A teenager with golden hair and a blazing aura, standing in what remained of Orange Town Square. The energy crackling around him looked like nothing Garp had ever seen in 30 years of Marine service. "Monkey D. Luffy," he read aloud, then froze. "Monkey D." His eyes flew to the next page, scanning the details frantically. Age 17. Grandson of Marine hero Monkey D. Garp. Devil Fruit, human model, Saiyan unconfirmed. Power level, extreme threat. "That little brat," Garp whispered, then threw back his head and laughed so hard that Marines 3 floors down could hear him. "Bhahaha, so the kid finally set sail." "Sir," Captain Bogart appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. "Is everything all right? My grandson just made his debut as a pirate." Garp wiped tears from his eyes. And apparently he's scaring the hell out of everyone. Bogard glanced at the open file and paled. Sir, this report classifies him as an extreme threat. The power readings. I know what the power readings say. Garp's laughter faded as he studied the photograph more carefully. Golden hair, energy aura, that look of controlled fury in his eyes. But this isn't right. Luffy ate the gomu fruit. He's supposed to be rubber. Perhaps the initial reports were incorrect. No, Garp stood up, suddenly serious. I saw him eat that fruit myself. This is something else entirely. He paused, thinking back to that day 10 years ago. Unless, a memory surfaced, Shanks mentioning something about 2 fruits, the difficulty in choosing which one to give up. But surely he wouldn't have let a child eat something this dangerous. Sir, there's more, Bogard said carefully. Fleet Admiral Sengoku has authorized the deployment of a special capture unit. Dr. Kaizen specifically requested to lead the mission. Garp's expression darkened. Dr. Kaizen was brilliant, but he was also completely amoral when it came to his research. The man would dissect his own mother if he thought it would advance his understanding of devil fruit genetics. Like hell he's getting his hands on my grandson, Garp growled. Cancel the mission. Sir, I can't. The order came directly from the Fleet Admiral. Then I guess I'll have to have a little chat with Sengoku. Sabaody, the sea restaurant 300 miles away, completely unaware of the storm brewing at Marine headquarters, Luffy was focused on much more important matters. Food, this is the best restaurant in the East Blue, he declared, his face pressed against the window of the massive ship restaurant. Look at all that food. The Sabaody was impressive, a floating restaurant built into what had once been a marine battleship. Even from the outside, you could smell the incredible aromas wafting from the kitchens. We can't afford this place, Nami said flatly, looking at the elegantly dressed customers visible through the windows. Do you see how fancy everyone looks? So, I'm hungry. Being hungry doesn't magically create money, Luffy. Zoro, who had been napping against the mast, opened one eye. Just let him eat. We'll figure out payment later. That's not how restaurants work. But Luffy was already climbing onto the Sabaody's deck, his nose leading him toward the source of the amazing smells. The rest of the crew had no choice but to follow. The interior of the restaurant was even more impressive than the outside. Crystal chandeliers, polished wooden floors, tables covered in white cloth. And the food, Luffy's eyes went wide as he saw plate after plate of incredible dishes being carried by waiters in pristine uniforms. Table for 4, a waiter approached them, taking in their somewhat ragged appearance with barely concealed disdain. Yes, Luffy said immediately, and bring me one of everything. One of everything. Everything on the menu. I'm really hungry. The waiter's expression suggested he thought they were either very wealthy or completely insane. I'll need to check with the manager about that. As they were seated at a corner table, Nami was frantically trying to calculate how much this was going to cost. Zoro was studying the other customers, noting which ones carried weapons and how they moved, and Luffy was staring at the kitchen doors like a dog watching a steak. Welcome to the Sabaody. They looked up to see a tall, thin man with a curled mustache and an impeccable suit approaching their table. Everything about him screamed refined, from his perfectly styled hair to his polished shoes. I am Sanji, he continued, then his eyes fell on Nami and his entire demeanor changed. And you, mademoiselle, are absolutely radiant. Please allow me to personally prepare something special for you. Nami blinked, unused to such over-the-top attention. That's very nice, but... And for your companions, Sanji's voice became noticeably cooler as he glanced at Luffy and Zoro. The standard menu will suffice. Actually, Luffy interrupted, I'd like one of everything. Sanji raised an eyebrow. Everything? Do you have any idea how expensive? I don't care about money, I just want food. Something in Luffy's tone, the pure, honest enthusiasm, made Sanji pause. He'd served a lot of customers over the years, from wealthy merchants to famous pirates. Most of them wanted to impress others or show off their wealth. But this kid seemed to genuinely just love food. Well, Sanji lit a cigarette, I suppose I can make an exception, but if you can't pay... We'll figure something out, Zoro said calmly. That's when the trouble started. The restaurant doors burst open with a tremendous crash, and in walked Don Krieg and his crew. Even after their recent defeat by Hawkeye Mihawk, Krieg's presence filled the room with menace. His golden armor was dented and scarred, but he still carried himself like a man who was used to taking whatever he wanted. Food, Krieg roared, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent restaurant. Bring me food or I'll sink this floating restaurant. The other customers began to panic, some heading for the exits while others cowered behind their tables. But Luffy just kept staring at the kitchen doors, apparently oblivious to the commotion. Sir, Sanji approached Krieg calmly, we're happy to serve you, but you'll need to keep your voice down. This is a respectable establishment. Respectable? Krieg backhanded Sanji, sending the chef sprawling. I'm Don Krieg. I take what I want. That got Luffy's attention. Hey, he said, standing up slowly, that wasn't very nice. Krieg turned to look at him, taking in the straw hat, the simple clothes, the youthful face. What did you say, kid? I said that wasn't very nice. Luffy's voice was still calm, but Zoro recognized the subtle change in his posture. He was just trying to do his job. And what are you going to do about it? Luffy considered this seriously. I'm going to ask you to apologize. Krieg stared at him for a moment, then burst into laughter. Apologize? Do you know who I am? I'm the strongest pirate in the East Blue. I have a bounty of 17 million berries. I don't care about your bounty, Luffy said simply. You hurt someone who didn't deserve it. You little. Krieg's massive fist swung toward Luffy's head. Luffy caught it without even looking. The restaurant went dead silent. Krieg's punch, which could shatter stone, was stopped cold by a teenager's bare hand. Now you're starting to annoy me, Luffy said, and his grip tightened on Krieg's fist until the armored pirate winced in pain. Sanji, picking himself up from the floor, stared in amazement. He'd seen Krieg's strength firsthand. The man had destroyed entire fleets with his bare hands. But this kid was holding him like he was a child. What? What are you? Krieg gasped, trying to pull his hand free. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, Luffy replied, and I'm going to be king of the pirates. Then he smiled, and it wasn't his usual cheerful grin. This smile had teeth. But right now, I'm just really hungry, and you're interrupting my meal. The golden shimmer started small, just a faint glow around Luffy's hand where he was holding Krieg's fist. But as his annoyance grew, the light spread up his arm across his chest until his entire body was outlined in crackling energy. Impossible, one of Krieg's crew whispered. Captain, his power level. I can see that, you idiot, Krieg snarled, but there was fear in his voice now. Sanji watched in fascination as Luffy's hair began to lighten, shifting from black to golden brown to pure gold. His eyes took on that eerie greenish tint, and the energy around him made the air itself vibrate. But this transformation was different from the one in Orange Town, more controlled. The power was there, Sanji could feel it pressing down on everyone in the restaurant, but Luffy wasn't losing himself to it. Last chance, Luffy said, and his voice carried a weight that made the chandeliers shake. Apologize to the chef, leave quietly, and I'll let you go. Never, Krieg drew back his other fist, the one equipped with his exploding gauntlet. I'm Don Krieg. I don't apologize to anyone. The punch launched with explosive force, a blast that should have leveled half the restaurant. Luffy caught that one too. Wrong answer, he said sadly. What followed wasn't really a fight, it was a demonstration. Luffy moved like lightning, his golden aura leaving trails in the air as he systematically dismantled Krieg's armor. Each punch was precisely placed enough force to dent the golden plates, but not enough to cause permanent injury. He was holding back, Sanji realized. Even in this transformed state, he was being careful not to kill. This is impossible, Krieg screamed as another piece of his famous armor went flying. I'm the strongest in the East Blue. No, Luffy said, grabbing Krieg by the chest and lifting him off the ground with one hand. You're just a bully who picks on people weaker than you. The final attack came as Luffy drew back his fist, golden energy crackling around it like concentrated lightning. Saiyan punch, the beam of energy that erupted from his knuckles caught Krieg square in the chest, launching him through the restaurant's reinforced walls and out into the ocean beyond. He hit the water with a tremendous splash and didn't resurface. His crew took one look at the golden-haired figure, standing in the wreckage of their captain's armor, and decided that a strategic retreat was in order. As the last of them fled, Luffy's transformation faded. The golden glow died away, his hair returned to black, and he swayed slightly on his feet. But he didn't collapse this time, he was getting better at controlling the power. Now, he said, turning back to Sanji with his usual bright smile, about that food. Sanji stared at him for a long moment. The kid had just defeated one of the most feared pirates in the East Blue without breaking a sweat, and his first concern was still his meal. You're not normal, are you? Sanji asked. Nope, Luffy grinned. I ate a devil fruit. I've seen devil fruit users before. That wasn't normal devil fruit power. It's complicated, Zoro said, joining the conversation. Let's just say he's special. Sanji looked around at the damaged restaurant, then at his fellow chefs who were emerging from hiding. The Sabaody would survive, it had weathered worse storms than Don Krieg. But something about this encounter felt different. Why did you help? He asked Luffy. Help with what? You could have just ignored Krieg, let him take what he wanted and leave. Why get involved? Luffy tilted his head, genuinely confused by the question. Because he was being mean to you, and you were just trying to do your job. It was such a simple answer, but Sanji could hear the absolute sincerity in it. This kid had risked a fight with one of the most dangerous pirates in the East Blue just because someone was being treated unfairly. You said you're going to be king of the pirates. That's right, and you want to cook for your crew. Are you offering? Sanji was quiet for a moment, thinking about his life at the Sabaody. It was safe, comfortable, predictable. He had a job he was good at, people who respected him, a future he could plan for. But watching Luffy fight had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten. There were still adventures to be had, dreams to chase, horizons to explore. And more than that, there was something about Luffy's power that fascinated him. Not just the incredible strength, but the loneliness he'd glimpsed behind it. The weight of carrying abilities that could accidentally hurt the people you were trying to protect. The All Blue, Sanji said suddenly. What about it? It's a legendary sea where fish from all 4 oceans gather. Every chef dreams of finding it, but most people think it's just a myth. Sounds awesome, we'll definitely find it. Sanji smiled at Luffy's instant, unwavering confidence. Just like that, you don't even know where to look. So, we'll figure it out along the way. And you think your little crew can handle the Grand Line? We'll get stronger, Luffy said simply. We'll help each other get stronger. That was it. That was the moment Sanji made his decision. Not because of Luffy's power, though that was certainly impressive. Not because of his confidence, though that was inspiring. But because of his absolute faith that they would succeed together. All right, Sanji said, untying his apron. I'm in, really? Awesome. Luffy's grin could have powered the restaurant's lights. We're going to have the best adventures. As Sanji went to say goodbye to Zeph and the other cooks, Nami pulled Luffy aside. That transformation, she said quietly, you're getting better at controlling it. Yeah, I think so. It doesn't hurt as much afterwards anymore. But people are starting to notice. That Marine unit that showed up in Orange Town. They weren't there by coincidence. Luffy's expression grew more serious. I know, Shanks warned me this might happen. So what's the plan? Get stronger, find good crewmates. Protect the people I care about. That's not really a plan, Luffy. Sure it is, his grin returned. It's the best plan ever, Nami sighed, but she was smiling too. For all his simplicity, there was something reassuring about Luffy's approach to problems. No complicated schemes, no contingency plans, just absolute determination to push forward no matter what stood in the way. Sir, one of the Sabaody's waiters approached nervously, about the payment for your meal. Oh right, Luffy reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of bottle caps. Will this cover it? The waiter's eye twitched. Sir, those are, I'll handle it, Nami said quickly, already calculating how much of their limited funds this meal would cost them. Marine ship Predator, 200 miles away. Dr. Kaizen stood on the deck of his specially equipped research vessel, studying the reports from his surveillance network. The photograph from Orange Town was just the beginning. He now had detailed energy readings, witness testimonies, and most importantly, genetic samples from the destruction sites. The readings are off the charts, his assistant reported. Whatever this boy consumed, it's unlike any devil fruit we've cataloged. That's because it's not just any devil fruit, Kaizen murmured, his eyes gleaming with scientific fervor. It's my masterpiece, 10 years of searching, following every rumor and lead across the 4 seas. The Saiyan project had been his greatest achievement before those red hair pirates stole it. But now his creation had awakened, and the power readings suggested it had developed beyond even his wildest projections. Sir, we've received new intelligence. The subject has recruited additional crew members and is heading toward the Grand Line. Perfect. Kaizen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Increase speed. I want to intercept them before they reach Reverse Mountain. Sir, are you certain this is wise? The power readings from his recent encounters are exactly what I hoped they would be, Kaizen finished. Do you realize what we're dealing with, Lieutenant? This isn't just a powerful devil fruit user. This is the successful fusion of human physiology with the genetic legacy of the most powerful warrior race in existence. The lieutenant looked confused. Sir, I don't understand. Warrior race? Of course you don't. Kaizen turned back to his instruments, his mind already working through the capture protocols. But you will. Once I have my creation back in the laboratory, the entire world will understand what true power looks like. On his desk sat a thick file labeled Project Saiyan Phase 2. Inside were blueprints for artificial enhancement procedures, genetic modification techniques, and most disturbing of all, plans for mass production. Dr. Kaizen wasn't just planning to reclaim his creation. He was planning to build an army. and somewhere in the east blue, completely unaware of the storm approaching Monkey D. Luffy was teaching his new cook how to make his favorite meal while his navigator tried to figure out how they were going to pay for it. The hunt had begun. Kakasi village, 3 days later. Nami had been quiet since they'd left the Sabaody. Not her usual calculating quiet, where you could practically hear her counting money or planning their next move. This was different, darker, like she was carrying something heavy that she couldn't put down. Luffy noticed, of course. He wasn't as oblivious as people thought, he just chose to focus on the things that mattered. And right now, what mattered was that one of his crew was hurting. "This is it," Nami said as their small boat approached the dock of a modest village. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "This is my home." The village looked peaceful enough. Small houses with orange groves stretching behind them, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. But there was something wrong with the picture. The streets were too empty. The few people visible moved quickly, heads down like they were afraid of being noticed. "Nice place," Sanji said, lighting a cigarette. "Quiet, too quiet," Zoro muttered, his hand instinctively moving to his sword hilts. As they walked through the village, Luffy could see the fear in people's eyes. It reminded him of Shell's town under Captain Morgan's rule, but worse. This wasn't just oppression, this was terror. "Nami," an elderly woman called out, stepping onto her porch. "You're back, does that mean—" "Not yet, Najiko," Nami replied, and there was pain in her voice. "But soon." "I promise." The woman Najiko looked at Luffy and his crew with a mixture of hope and worry. "Are these—" "Friends," Nami said quickly. "Just friends passing through." But Luffy was studying Najiko's face, noting the family resemblance, the way she looked at Nami with protective concern. "You're her sister?" It wasn't a question. Najiko nodded slowly. "Then you know what's wrong," Luffy continued. "Someone's hurting her, hurting all of you." "Luffy," Nami's voice was sharp with warning. Don't what?" "Care about my navigator." The simple honesty in his words made Najiko's eyes widen. She'd seen Nami with other pirates before, temporary alliances, business relationships, nothing more. But the way this boy looked at her sister. "You really don't know, do you?" Najiko asked softly. "Know what? About Arlong." The name hit like a physical blow. Nami's face went white and her hands clenched into fists. "Who's Arlong?" Luffy asked, but his voice had already taken on a different quality. The same edge it got when he was getting angry. "He's—" Najiko started, then stopped. "Maybe you should see for yourself." Arlong Park, 1 hour later, the massive structure rose from the water like something out of a nightmare. Part fortress, part monument to cruelty, Arlong Park was designed to intimidate. Shark motifs covered every surface, and the building itself was shaped like a gigantic shark's head, complete with massive teeth framing the entrance. But it wasn't the architecture that made Luffy's blood start to boil. It was the sign posted outside: "Tribute due 100,000 berries per adult, 50,000 per child, monthly, no exceptions." 100,000, Sanji's cigarette fell from his lips, per person. "Every month, most people in the village don't make that in a year," Najiko explained quietly. "Those who can't pay." She didn't need to finish. The implications were clear. "Nami," Luffy said, his voice deadly calm. "How long has this been going on?" 8 years. The words came out like broken glass. 8 years. Luffy repeated it slowly, letting it sink in. His navigator, his friend, had been living under this for 8 years. "And you've been what, trying to buy everyone's freedom?" Nami's silence was answer enough. "How much?" When she didn't respond, Luffy turned to Najiko. "How much does he want?" 100 million berries, Najiko whispered. "For the whole village. And how much has she saved?" 93 million. She's so close The sound of laughter cut through the air like a knife. Cold, cruel laughter that made everyone's skin crawl. "Shahahaha. If it isn't our little navigator." The massive fishman that emerged from Arlong Park looked like a walking nightmare. 8 feet tall, covered in scars, with teeth like a chainsaw and dead black eyes that held no trace of mercy. This was Arlong, and even without knowing the details, Luffy could tell he was the kind of monster who enjoyed causing pain. "Arlong," Nami's voice was barely steady. "I'm still working. You'll have your money soon." "Oh, I know you will." Arlong's grin revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Because if you don't, this charming village is going to have some unfortunate accidents. You gave me time." "I did. And I'm starting to think that was a mistake." Arlong's eyes fell on Luffy and the others. "Who are your friends, Nami?" "Nobody important," Nami said quickly. "Just, we're her crew," Luffy interrupted. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Arlong's grin widened. "Her crew? Shahahaha, did you hear that, boys? Our little thief thinks she has a crew now." More fishmen emerged from the park, a octopus fishman with 6 arms, a ray fishman with a massive nose, others that looked like walking nightmares from the deep ocean. All of them laughing at Arlong's joke. "I suppose," Arlong continued, his voice dripping with mock thoughtfulness, "that changes things. After all, if she has a crew, she doesn't need her deal with me anymore." "What deal?" Luffy asked, but something in his gut already knew he wasn't going to like the answer. "Why, she works for me, of course. Has for 8 years, my personal navigator and thief. Shahahaha." The world seemed to stop. Luffy looked at Nami, searching her face for some sign that this wasn't true. But all he saw was shame, guilt, and a pain so deep it made his chest hurt. "Tell them, Nami," Arlong commanded. "Tell them how you've been stealing from pirates to fund my operations. Tell them how many ships you've led into ambushes. Tell them what you really are." "Stop," Nami whispered. "What was that?" "I said stop." She was crying now, years of suppressed pain finally breaking through. "You got what you wanted. I've given you everything. My maps, my skills, my life. What more do you want?" "I want you to understand your place," Arlong snarled, all pretense of amusement gone. "You're a human. You exist to serve your betters. And if these pathetic friends of yours don't like it," he gestured, and his crew moved to surround Luffy and the others, "they can join the rest of your village in paying tribute, permanently." That's when Luffy finally understood. The fear in the villagers' eyes, the guilt in Nami's voice, the way she'd been pushing them away since they arrived. She wasn't just trying to save money to buy her village's freedom, she was trying to protect them from this monster. "Nami," he said quietly, "look at me." She raised her tear-streaked face to meet his eyes. "Do you want to be free?" It was such a simple question, but it hit her like a thunderbolt. When was the last time someone had asked her what she wanted? When was the last time her desires had mattered more than her duty, her guilt, her fear? "Yes," she whispered. "Then you will be." The golden shimmer started immediately. Arlong noticed it first, a faint glow beginning to emanate from the boy in the straw hat. What the hell? But Luffy wasn't listening to him anymore. He was thinking about 8 years. 8 years of a 17-year-old girl carrying the weight of an entire village on her shoulders. 8 years of stealing and lying and hating herself because it was the only way to keep the people she loved alive. 8 years of this monster holding her family hostage. The golden light grew brighter. "I don't care how strong you think you are," Arlong snarled, raising his massive sword. "You're just another inferior human." The blade came crashing down toward Luffy's head. It shattered against his bare hand like glass. Arlong stared in shock at the pieces of his weapon scattered on the ground, then looked up to see Luffy's hair shifting from black to golden, his brown eyes taking on that eerie green tint. But this transformation was different. The previous times, Luffy's power had been driven by anger or excitement. This time, it was fueled by something deeper, something that resonated with the very core of what made him who he was. "You hurt her," Luffy said, and his voice carried a weight that made the very air seem to vibrate. "You hurt someone under my protection." The golden aura exploded outward like a shockwave, sending the other fishmen stumbling backward. Arlong himself had to brace against the force of it. "Impossible," he breathed. "What are you?" "I'm her captain," Luffy replied simply. Then he moved. Even Zoro's trained eye couldn't follow it. One moment Luffy was standing 20 feet away, the next his fist was buried in Arlong's stomach. The massive fishman doubled over, gasping for air. "This is for 8 years of fear," Luffy said, and his next punch sent Arlong flying through the wall of his own fortress. The other fishmen tried to intervene, but they might as well have tried to stop a hurricane. Luffy moved through them like they weren't even there, each strike perfectly placed, never using more force than necessary, but always exactly enough to put them down. "The building," Sanji said suddenly, "he's not just fighting them, he's destroying the whole place." It was true. Every punch, every kick, every energy blast was directed not just at Arlong's crew, but at the structure itself. Luffy was systematically dismantling Arlong Park piece by piece. "Why?" Negico whispered. "Because," Zoro said, understanding dawning in his voice, "it's not enough to beat them, he's erasing the symbol. Making sure it can never intimidate anyone ever again." Arlong emerged from the rubble, bleeding but not beaten. His eyes had lost their cold amusement and were now filled with rage. "You think you can just walk into my territory and, your territory?" Luffy's voice cut through his rant like a blade. "This isn't your territory, this is Nami's home." "I am the superior being here," Arlong roared. "Fishmen are evolution's next step. Humans are nothing but, you talk too much." Luffy's fist connected with Arlong's jaw with a sound like thunder. The fishman went flying again, this time crashing through what remained of his fortress's main support beam. "I don't care about superior or inferior," Luffy said, walking through the smoke and debris. I don't care about your species or your philosophy or whatever twisted logic you use to justify this. He grabbed Arlong by the throat, lifting the massive fishman off the ground with one hand. You made my navigator cry, that's all I need to know. The final attack wasn't flashy. No energy beams, no dramatic techniques, just a simple punch backed by all the power of Luffy's transformation and all the fury of his protective instincts. Arlong went down and didn't get back up. As the golden glow faded and Luffy's hair returned to black, the silence was deafening. Arlong Park, the symbol of 8 years of oppression, lay in ruins around them. It's over, Luffy said simply, then looked at Nami. You're free. She stared at him, then at the destruction around them, then back at him. Just like that, just like that. But the money, the tribute system. The other villages, we'll figure it out. Luffy's grin was tired but genuine. That's what crews do, they help each other solve problems. That's when she finally broke down. 8 years of bottled-up emotion came pouring out in great, gasping sobs. But for the first time in nearly a decade, they were tears of relief. Luffy didn't say anything. He just stood there and let her cry, ready to catch her if she fell. Why? She finally managed. Why would you do this for me? Because you're my navigator, he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And I protect what's mine. 3 hours later, the celebration in Kokasi village was unlike anything they'd ever seen. The entire population had turned out, bringing food and drink and stories they'd been too afraid to tell for 8 years. Children who had grown up under Arlong's shadow were laughing freely for the first time in their lives. Nami sat apart from the main celebration, on a hill overlooking the village with a thick book in her lap. She'd retrieved it from her old room, a comprehensive guide to devil fruits that she'd been studying for years. Find anything interesting? Luffy asked, dropping down beside her. Maybe. She flipped through several pages before stopping at a particular entry. Human fruit model warrior. Says here it grants enhanced physical abilities and battle instincts. That doesn't sound right. No, it doesn't. She turned more pages. Model giant, model longarm, model fishman, but no model. Saiyan, so what does that mean? It means, Nami said carefully, that either your fruit is so rare it's not in any official records or it's not natural. Someone made it. Luffy was quiet for a moment, processing this. Would that change anything? What do you mean? I mean, if someone made my power instead of it being natural, would that make it less real? Would it make me less of a person? Nami looked at him in surprise. Of course not. Your power is part of you now, regardless of where it came from, and even without it, you'd still be. She paused, searching for the right words. Still be what? Still be the kind of person who'd tear down a fortress to make one friend stop crying. Luffy's grin was brighter than the setting sun. Good, because I was starting to worry. As they sat together watching their friends celebrate with the villagers, Nami felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 years. Hope for the future, Luffy. Yeah, thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, we still have to find the One Piece. About that, Nami's expression grew serious. If we're really going to the Grand Line, you need to understand something. The power you showed today, there are people out there who will do anything to get their hands on it. Let them come. I'm serious. The world government, the Marines, other pirates, when word gets out about what you can do, they'll all want a piece of you. Then I guess we'd better get stronger, Luffy said simply. In the distance, they could see Zoro training with some of the village men, showing them basic sword techniques. Sanji was in the middle of a group of children, teaching them how to cook. Their crew was growing, becoming something more than just a group of people traveling together. They were becoming a family. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the village, a marine surveillance ship was transmitting urgent reports back to headquarters. Reports about golden transformations, impossible power levels, and the complete destruction of one of the East Blue's most entrenched criminal operations. Dr. Kaizen received the transmission with a mixture of excitement and concern. His creation was growing stronger faster than he'd anticipated. Much faster. Increase speed, he ordered. I want to intercept them before they reach the Grand Line. Sir, are you certain we can contain something with that power level? Kaizen smiled, but it was the smile of a predator who had finally found his prey. Oh, we're not going to contain it, he said softly. We're going to study it, and then we're going to replicate it. The hunt was accelerating. Reverse Mountain, the gateway to the Grand Line, the massive red cliff face of Reverse Mountain loomed ahead like a wall between worlds. Currents from all 4 seas converged here, creating an upward-flowing river that defied logic and carried ships into the most dangerous waters on the planet. This is insane, Nami muttered, checking their heading for the 20th time. We're literally sailing up a mountain. Isn't it awesome? Luffy laughed, hanging off the bow as their ship was caught in the impossible current. I can't wait to see what's on the other side. The Going Merry, their new ship, acquired through a combination of gratitude from Kakasi village and some creative financing that Nami preferred not to discuss, groaned under the stress of the vertical climb. But she held together, carrying them higher and higher until they could see the curvature of the world below. There, Sanji pointed ahead. The peak, the moment of transition, was breathtaking. 1 second they were climbing an impossible river, the next they were flying through the air at the mountain's summit before crashing down into the Grand Line proper. We made it, Luffy cheered. We're really here, but their celebration was cut short by a sound that made everyone's blood run cold, the whistle of incoming cannon fire. Incoming, Zoro shouted. The cannonball exploded in the water just off their starboard side, sending up a massive geyser. More shots followed, bracketing their position with deadly accuracy. Where are they shooting from? Nami frantically scanned the horizon. There, Sanji's voice was grim. He pointed to what had seemed like empty ocean, but was now revealing itself to be something far more sinister. A marine ship was rising from beneath the waves, water streaming off its hull as advanced cloaking technology disengaged. It was unlike any marine vessel they'd seen before, sleeker, more predatory, bristling with weapons that looked far too advanced for standard Navy issue. Mirage coating, Zoro observed. Military grade. Someone really wanted to catch us off guard. The ship's speakers crackled to life, broadcasting a voice that was cultured, confident, and utterly without mercy. Attention, pirates of the Going Merry, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately and you will be taken alive for questioning. Like hell, Luffy shouted back. Who are you? I am Captain Kaizen of Marine Special Unit 7, and you Monkey D. Luffy are coming with me. The name hit like a physical blow. Nami's research had turned up references to a Dr. Kaizen in some of the more classified marine documents she'd managed to steal. If this was a relative. Special Unit 7, she called out. I've never heard of that designation. Of course you haven't. We handle threats too dangerous for regular marine forces. Another barrage of cannon fire, this time closer, much closer. They're not trying to sink us, Zoro realized. They're hurting us. Into what? Sanji asked. Their answer came in the form of a massive splash as something launched itself from the marine ship's deck. It flew through the air in a perfect arc before landing on the Going Merry's deck with enough force to crack the wooden planks. Captain Iron Fist, Kaizen straightened slowly, giving them their first good look at him. He was tall, powerfully built, with silver hair despite appearing to be only in his 30s. His marine coat was pristine white, but it was his eyes that caught their attention. They held an intensity that was uncomfortably familiar. So, he said, studying Luffy with scientific interest, you're my father's masterpiece. Your father, Luffy tilted his head in confusion. Dr. Kaizen, the man who created the fruit you consumed. Captain Kaizen's smile was cold. Did you really think something that powerful was natural? The words hit the crew like a thunderbolt. Nami's research had suggested Luffy's fruit might be artificial, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. You're lying, Luffy said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Tell me, boy, have you ever wondered why your transformations feel so foreign, why the power seems to come from somewhere outside yourself? Captain Kaizen began to remove his marine coat, revealing a physique that was clearly enhanced beyond normal human limits. His muscles seemed to have an almost metallic sheen, and when he flexed his hands, energy crackled between his fingers. You see, my father spent decades researching the genetic legacy of an extinct warrior race. The Saiyans were supposedly the most powerful fighters in existence, capable of transformations that multiplied their strength exponentially. Supposedly, Zoro's hand moved to his sword hilts. Well, they were extinct. Until my father found a way to recreate their essence artificially. Kaizen's grin was predatory. You're not the only one with Saiyan blood, boy. That's when he transformed. Unlike Luffy's gradual shift from black to gold, Kaizen's transformation was instant and mechanical. His hair blazed silver white, his eyes became completely white, and a harsh, crackling aura surrounded his body like contained lightning. Artificial Saiyan enhancement, he announced. All the power, none of the emotional instability. Emotional instability, Luffy's voice had taken on that dangerous edge. Your transformations are triggered by feelings, aren't they? Anger, protectiveness, desperation, how wonderfully primitive. Kaizen flexed his enhanced muscles. Mine are controlled by pure will and scientific precision. To demonstrate, he moved. The deck where he'd been standing exploded into splinters as he launched himself forward. Luffy barely had time to dodge before Kaizen's fist cratered the mast behind him. Fast, Luffy admitted, his own golden aura beginning to shimmer. And that's just the beginning. The fight that followed was unlike anything the crew had witnessed. Both combatants moved at speeds that made them blur, exchanging blows that sent shockwaves across the ocean. But where Luffy's previous opponents had been overwhelmed by his raw power, Kaizen matched him strike for strike. "You're holding back," Kaizen observed as they separated after a particularly vicious exchange. "Still afraid of your own strength?" "I'm not afraid of anything," Luffy growled, his transformation deepening. His hair shifted to full gold, his aura blazed brighter. "Prove it." This time when they clashed, the impact was so violent it sent both ships rocking. Luffy's punch met Kaizen's block with a sound like thunder, and for a moment they were locked in perfect equilibrium. "Interesting," Kaizen said conversationally, even while straining against Luffy's strength. "Your power output is higher than my calculations suggested, but you lack technique." He demonstrated by shifting his stance slightly, redirecting Luffy's force and sending the younger fighter stumbling. Before Luffy could recover, Kaizen's counterattack sent him flying across the deck. "Luffy," Nami started to move toward him, but Zoro caught her arm. "Wait," he said grimly. "Something's not right." They were right to be concerned. Luffy was stronger, much stronger, but Kaizen was fighting smarter. Every exchange taught him more about Luffy's patterns, his limitations, his weaknesses. "You rely too heavily on brute force," Kaizen lectured as he landed another precise strike. "Power without control is just destruction waiting to happen." "Maybe that's enough," Luffy snarled, his aura flaring even brighter. But as he pushed his transformation further, something unexpected happened. His power began to fluctuate, the golden glow flickering like a candle in the wind. Kaizen smiled. "And there it is, the fatal flaw in my father's design." "What are you talking about?" Luffy gasped, struggling to maintain his transformation. "Emotional dependency. Your artificial Saiyan cells require genuine feeling to function properly, but sustained combat creates stress, and stress disrupts emotional stability." Kaizen's voice was clinically detached. "In short, the longer you fight, the weaker you become." It was true. Luffy could feel it happening, the connection to his power growing more tenuous with each passing moment. The transformation that had made him feel invincible was betraying him at the worst possible moment. "This is why artificial enhancement is superior," Kaizen continued, his own power remaining perfectly steady. "No emotions to destabilize the process, no weakness to exploit." That's when Sanji made his move. "Maybe your power is stable," the cook said, his leg blazing with fire as he launched himself at Kaizen, "but you're still an arrogant bastard who forgot he wasn't fighting alone." Kaizen barely managed to block the flaming kick, his eyes widening in surprise. "Impossible, how did you?" "Because he's not fighting you," Zoro said, appearing on Kaizen's other side with all three swords drawn. "We are." Santo Ryu, Onigiri, the three-sword technique caught Kaizen completely off guard. He managed to avoid a fatal blow, but Zoro's blades left deep cuts across his enhanced muscles. "You think numbers will save you?" Kaizen snarled, but there was blood running down his arms now. "Numbers hell," Nami called out from across the deck. "We've got something better." She was holding something that looked like a weathered device, but modified with strange components that sparked with electrical energy. Thunder Lance Tempo, the lightning bolt that erupted from her weapon, was far more powerful than anything she should have been capable of producing. It struck Kaizen square in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. "What? How did you?" he gasped. "You want to know about artificial enhancement?" Luffy was back on his feet, his transformation stabilizing as he drew strength from his crew's support. "Here's the difference between us." His aura flared again, but this time it was different. Still golden, still powerful, but now it carried something that Kaizen's artificial enhancement could never replicate. "My power doesn't come from science," Luffy said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "It comes from the people I'm fighting for." The final clash was brief but decisive. Luffy's punch, backed by the unwavering support of his crew, shattered Kaizen's artificial enhancement like glass. The Marine captain hit the deck hard and didn't get back up. As the golden glow faded, Luffy swayed slightly but remained standing. His crew gathered around him, ready to catch him if he fell. "Impossible," Kaizen whispered from where he lay. "Your power should have failed." "The emotional stress should have." "Should have what?" Luffy interrupted. "Made me weaker. You really don't understand anything, do you?" He looked around at his crew, at Zoro's fierce loyalty, Sanji's protective fury, Nami's brilliant tactical mind. My emotions don't make me weak, they make me stronger, because I'm not just fighting for myself. Kaizen stared at him for a long moment, then began to laugh. It was a bitter, defeated sound. You have no idea what's coming, do you? My father won't stop with just you. He's planning something that will change the entire world. Then I guess we'll have to stop him, Luffy said simply. You can't. He has resources you can't imagine. An entire army of artificial Saiyans, each one more powerful than the last. Kaizen's smile was cruel despite his defeat. And unlike you, they won't have pesky emotions getting in the way. Before anyone could respond, a series of explosions rocked both ships. Kaizen's marine vessel was self-destructing, taking all evidence of the encounter with it. Emergency extraction protocol, Kaizen explained as a small submarine surfaced nearby. Can't let the technology fall into pirate hands. As he was pulled aboard the submarine by his remaining crew, he called back one final warning. Enjoy your victory, Straw Hat. It may be your last. 1 hour later, Grand Line Waters the Going Merry sailed through the afternoon calm, her crew processing what they'd learned. Luffy sat at the bow, unusually quiet as he watched the horizon. You okay? Nami asked, settling down beside him. Just thinking. He was quiet for a moment. Do you think it matters that my power isn't natural? Do you feel any different knowing the truth? Luffy considered this seriously. No, I mean it's still my power, right? I'm the one who uses it. I'm the one who chooses what to do with it. Then that's your answer. But what if there really are others? Artificial Saiyans like that guy said. This time it was Zoro who answered, from where he was cleaning his swords nearby. Then we'll deal with them when we meet them. Same as we deal with any other threat. Together, Sanji added, joining the conversation. Together, Luffy agreed, his usual grin returning. I like the sound of that. But privately, each of them was thinking about Kaizen's warning. An army of artificial Saiyans, all with Luffy's power but none of his restraint. It was a terrifying prospect. We need to get stronger, Nami said quietly, all of us. We will, Luffy replied with absolute confidence. We'll get so strong that it won't matter how many artificial warriors they throw at us. And if that's not enough, Luffy's grin became fierce. Then we'll just have to become stronger than that too. Dr. Kaizen's laboratory, 3 days later, the report from his son was both illuminating and concerning. The boy's power had developed beyond even Dr. Kaizen's most optimistic projections, but more troubling was his apparent ability to stabilize his transformations through emotional connections. Fascinating, he murmured, studying the energy readings from the battle. The artificial Saiyan cells are adapting, forming symbiotic relationships with genuine human emotions. This was not part of the original design. The Saiyan genetic template was supposed to be purely combat-focused, driven by battle instinct and warrior pride. But somehow, this particular subject had managed to integrate the artificial enhancement with his own human nature. Sir, his assistant interrupted, the Ministry of Science is requesting a progress update on the mass production project. Tell them Phase 2 will begin within the month, Kaizen replied absently, still studying the data. But first, we need to recapture the original subject. Sir, your son's report suggests that may be difficult. Difficult, yes, but not impossible. Kaizen smiled, pulling up blueprints for a massive facility hidden somewhere in the Grand Line. Activate St. Bardock, tell him his services are required. The assistant paled. Sir, are you certain he's unstable? He's perfect, Kaizen corrected. A celestial dragon with artificial Saiyan enhancement and no pesky conscience to hold him back. Exactly what we need to bring my wayward creation home. As orders went out across the marine network, setting in motion a hunt that would span the entire Grand Line, the Straw Hat Pirates sailed on toward their next adventure, blissfully unaware of the storm that was building around them. But in his laboratory, surrounded by tanks full of artificial Saiyan prototypes, Dr. Kaizen was already planning their reunion. And this time, he wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating the power of human emotion. This time, he would simply eliminate it entirely. Whiskey Peak, 2 days after the Kaizen encounter, the town looked welcoming enough from the harbor. Neat rows of houses built into massive cacti, warm lights glowing in windows, and a crowd of cheerful people gathered at the dock to welcome them. Look at that, Luffy pointed excitedly at the reception committee. They're having a party just for us. Since when do random towns throw parties for pirates? Zoro muttered suspiciously, but his voice was lost in the cheering crowd. Welcome to Whiskey Peak. A large man with curly hair and a saxophone stepped forward. I'm the mayor of this fine town. Please, you must be our guests tonight. Before anyone could object, they were swept up in a whirlwind of hospitality. Tables laden with food, barrels of sake, music and dancing that went on long into the night. Luffy was in his element, eating and laughing with seemingly genuine enthusiasm from their hosts. But Nami noticed things. The way some of the townspeople kept checking pocket watches, how their smiles never quite reached their eyes. The fact that everyone seemed to be trying just a little too hard to get them drunk. "Zoro," she whispered during a particularly loud song, "something's not right here." "I know," he replied without opening his eyes. He was sprawled in a corner, seemingly passed out from drinking, but Nami could tell he was faking it. Too organized, too perfect. "What do we do?" "Wait, let them make the first move." They didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, when Luffy had finally succumbed to his food coma and Sanji had drunk himself into unconsciousness trying to impress the local women, the cheerful facade dropped entirely. "Bounty hunters," the mayor announced to his companions, pulling out a wanted poster with Luffy's face on it. 30 million berries for the captain alone, not bad for a night's work. "What about the others?" someone asked. "The swordsman's worth 12 million, the others, well, they're witnesses, can't have witnesses." That's when Zoro made his move. "Funny thing about witnesses," he said, rising smoothly to his feet without a trace of intoxication, "sometimes they fight back." The battle that erupted was brief but vicious. Zoro moved through the bounty hunters like a whirlwind of steel, his 3 swords cutting down anyone foolish enough to get in his way. But there were a lot of them, and they'd been planning this ambush for weeks. "Zoro," Nami shouted as a group of hunters with rifles took aim at him from a rooftop. "I see them," he called back, but he was pinned down by enemies on ground level. That's when Luffy woke up. "What's all the noise?" he asked groggily, then took in the scene around him. Zoro fighting for his life, Nami and Sanji slowly coming to consciousness, enemies everywhere. "Oh," he said, his voice suddenly much more alert. "You guys lied to us." The golden shimmer started immediately, but this time something was different. Instead of the usual explosive transformation, Luffy's power remained contained, controlled. His hair stayed black, his eyes retained their normal brown color, but energy crackled around his hands like captured lightning. "Zoro," he called out. "Catch!" Instead of attacking the bounty hunters directly, Luffy reached out with his kai and touched his swordsman's back. Golden energy flowed from him into Zoro, and suddenly the other man's movements became impossibly fast and precise. "What the hell?" Zoro gasped as he found himself moving at speeds that defied belief. His swords cut through rifle barrels like they were made of paper, and when he leaped to the rooftop, he covered the distance in a single bound. "I'm sharing," Luffy called back, then turned to Sanji and Nami. "Want some?" The cook's kicks had never hit so hard. Enhanced by Luffy's kai, each strike carried enough force to shatter stone, and when he moved, he left trails of golden light in the air. Nami's weather attacks became miniature hurricanes, her lightning bolts turned into devastating energy lances. But the most remarkable thing wasn't the increased power, it was how they moved together. For the first time since forming their crew, they fought as a true unit. Zoro would create openings that Sanji exploited. Sanji would launch enemies into the air where Nami's attacks could hit them. Nami would blind opponents with lightning just as Zoro moved in for the finishing blow. And through it all, Luffy coordinated their efforts, his kai flowing between them like a golden thread that connected their movements. "This is incredible," Sanji laughed as he kicked a bounty hunter clear across the town square. "I feel like I could fight forever." "Don't get cocky," Zoro warned, though he was grinning as his enhanced swords carved through another wave of enemies. "We still don't know how many more there are." Their answer came in the form of explosions rocking the town from all sides. More bounty hunters were emerging from hidden positions, and these ones had heavy weapons. "Bazooka teams," Nami observed grimly. "They're trying to level the entire town with us in it." "Not if I can help it," Luffy said, his kai flaring brighter. "Everyone grab onto me." "What are you?" Zoro started to ask, but then Luffy's power enveloped all of them completely. What happened next defied explanation. Moving as one unified entity, the crew became a force of nature. They flowed through the town like liquid lightning, striking from multiple directions simultaneously, appearing and disappearing faster than the eye could follow. To the bounty hunters, it must have looked like they were fighting ghosts. Attacks came from impossible angles, enemies fell without anyone seeing who had struck them, and through it all, golden light danced through the shadows like captured starfare. "Impossible," the mayor gasped as his carefully planned ambush fell apart around him. "They're just 4 people." "No," a voice said from the darkness behind him. "There's something much more dangerous than that." The mayor spun around to find a young woman with blue hair and an elegant white and blue outfit. She looked like nobility, but she moved with the fluid grace of a trained fighter. "They're a crew," she continued, "a real crew where everyone fights for everyone else." "Who are you?" the mayor demanded. "Someone who's very interested in meeting pirates who can share power between them," she replied. "My name is Nefer Tari Vivi, and I think these particular pirates might be exactly what my country needs." 1 hour later, Whiskey Peak Town Square, the cleanup was methodical. The bounty hunters who were still conscious were tied up and left for whatever passed for law enforcement in this part of the Grand Line. Those who weren't conscious, well, they'd wake up eventually with splitting headaches and a healthy respect for the Straw Hat Pirates. "So," Luffy said, settling down next to their mysterious helper, "you said your country needs us." "I did." Vivi looked tired, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. "My name is Nefer Tari Vivi, Princess of Alabasta Kingdom." "A princess?" Sanji's eyes immediately turned to hearts. "Your Highness, it would be my honor to, can it, love cook," Zoro interrupted. "Let her talk, thank you," Vivi smiled gratefully. "My country is in crisis. A criminal organization called Baroque Works has been manipulating our weather, causing droughts and civil unrest. They're trying to overthrow my father's government." "Sounds like standard villain stuff," Nami observed. "What makes it special?" "The man behind it all is Sir Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea." "But that's not the worst part." Vivi's expression darkened. 3 months ago, he underwent some kind of enhancement procedure. My agents report that he now has abilities far beyond what any normal devil fruit should provide. Luffy and his crew exchanged meaningful looks. After their encounter with Captain Kaizen, the mention of enhancement procedures set off all kinds of alarm bells. "What kind of abilities?" Zoro asked carefully. "Increased physical strength, energy projection attacks, and—" Vivi hesitated. "According to the reports, his hair sometimes turns golden when he fights." The silence that followed was deafening. "Golden hair," Luffy repeated slowly. "Like mine, you've seen this before," hope flickered in Vivi's eyes. "We've run into it, yeah." Luffy looked at his crew, seeing his own concerns reflected in their faces. "Someone's been playing around with artificial enhancements based on my power." "Your power?" Rather than explain the complex history of devil fruits and genetic experiments, Luffy decided on a demonstration. He let his kai flow outward just enough to make his hair flicker with golden light for a moment. Vivi's eyes widened. "That's exactly what the reports described, but how is that possible?" "Long story," Nami said. "The short version is that there's a mad scientist out there making artificial versions of Luffy's abilities and selling them to anyone willing to pay. And now one of them is trying to take over your country," Sanji concluded. "Will you help us?" Vivi asked, and there was no hiding the desperation in her voice. "I know it's a lot to ask, but my people are suffering, and if this crocodile really does have artificial versions of your power—" "Of course we'll help," Luffy said immediately. "That's what we do, just like that," Vivi looked surprised. "You don't even know me, I can't pay you anything substantial, and you'd be going up against one of the most powerful pirates in the world." "So," Luffy tilted his head in confusion. "You need help and we can give it. What else matters? Besides," Zoro added with a fierce grin, "I'm curious to see how artificial Saiyan power stacks up against the real thing." As they prepared to leave Whiskey Peak behind, setting course for Alabasta, none of them noticed the small Den Den Mushi hidden in the ruins of the mayor's office. It had been transmitting everything: the battle, the conversation, the revelation about Vivi's identity. Dr. Kaizen's laboratory. 2 hours later, the recording played for the 3rd time, and Dr. Kaizen's smile grew wider with each repetition. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The boy has learned to share his power with others. That wasn't in any of my projections. Sir, should we be concerned if he can enhance other fighters? On the contrary, this is excellent news." Kaizen pulled up a new set of files on his computer. "It means the artificial Saiyan cells are evolving even faster than I hoped, and now we have a perfect test environment. Sir, Alabasta, Sir Crocodile received one of our prototype enhancements 6 months ago. Not a complete Saiyan package, just enhanced strength and energy projection, but if the boy is heading there—" "You want them to fight? I want them to push each other to their limits," Kaizen corrected. "Nothing drives evolution like conflict. By the time they finish their battle, both subjects will have advanced far beyond their current capabilities. And then Saint Bardock will collect them both. Imagine 2 fully evolved artificial Saiyan specimens, plus the original creation. We'll have enough genetic material to equip an entire army." The assistant looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the reports suggest that Crocodile's enhancement has been affecting his mental state. Are we certain he can be controlled? Oh, I'm counting on him being uncontrollable, Kaizen laughed. The more desperate the battle, the faster the evolution, and if Crocodile happens to eliminate some of the boys' emotional anchors in the process. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both understood the implications. Luffy's power was stabilized by his connections to his crew. Remove those connections, and he would either become purely combat-focused like a true Saiyan, or he would break entirely. Either outcome would serve Dr. Kaizen's purposes perfectly. Little Garden 3 days later, the Island of Giants was everything the stories claimed and more. Massive trees that dwarfed buildings, dinosaurs the size of houses, and somewhere in the jungle, the sounds of an eternal battle between two ancient warriors. "This place is awesome," Luffy declared, immediately trying to befriend a brontosaurus that was approximately 10 times his size. "This place is dangerous," Nami corrected, consulting her map. "We need to get through here quickly if we want to reach Alabasta before Crocodile's plans advance too far." "Relax," Zoro said, though his hand never left his sword hilt. "What's the worst that could happen?" Their answer came in the form of a massive explosion that sent trees flying and shook the ground beneath their feet. "GGYGYGY, Dory wins again." The giant that emerged from the smoke was easily 60 feet tall, with a beard like a waterfall and an axe that could cleave mountains. Behind him, another giant of equal size was picking himself up from a crater that his impact had created. "Only because your beard distracted me, Buggy," the second giant called out cheerfully. "Next round, I'll remember to close my eyes. GGYGYGY, as if that would help." Sanji lit a cigarette with slightly shaking hands. "Are those actual giants?" "Dory and Buggy," VV said in amazement. "The legendary captains of the giant warrior pirates. They've been fighting on this island for over a century." "A century?" Luffy's eyes lit up. "That's so cool, I want to fight them too." "No," Nami, Zoro, and Sanji said in unison. "Oh, come on, just a little sparring match." That's when the real trouble started. Not from the giants, who seemed friendly enough despite their eternal combat, but from the jungle around them. Baroque Works agents had been waiting for their arrival, and now they struck from all directions at once. "Ambush!" Zoro shouted, his swords already in motion, but this wasn't like Whiskey Peak. These agents were better trained, better equipped, and they'd had time to study the reports from the previous battle. They knew about Luffy's power-sharing abilities, and they'd planned accordingly. "Separate them," their leader shouted. "Don't let the captain touch the others." Explosions erupted throughout the jungle, forcing the crew apart. Zoro found himself surrounded by sword-wielding agents. Sanji was being herded away by fighters who specialized in kicks. Nami and VV were pinned down by snipers, and Luffy was isolated in the center of it all, exactly as the enemy had planned. "Clever," he admitted, his kai beginning to flare. "But you made one mistake." "What's that?" the lead agent called out. "You assumed I need to touch them to share my power." The golden energy that erupted from Luffy didn't flow in the controlled streams they'd seen before. This time it spread outward like a shockwave, washing over the entire jungle. It found his crewmates wherever they were, enhancing their abilities just as it had at Whiskey Peak. But more than that, it awakened something else. Something much larger and much angrier. "GGYGYGY, what's this interesting energy?" Dory boomed. "It feels like the old days," Buggy added. "Like when we fought real warriors." The two giants, their 100-year battle temporarily forgotten, turned their attention to the Baroque Works agents with expressions of delighted anticipation. What followed could only be described as educational. The agents had planned for many contingencies, but two legendary giants deciding to join the fight was not one of them. "This is getting out of hand," the lead agent reported via Den Den Mushi. "Request immediate backup." "Negative," came the reply. "Orders are to observe only. Let them exhaust themselves against each other." "But sir, we're being obliterated." "Acceptable losses. Continue the mission." As the battle raged around them, Luffy found himself fighting alongside beings who represented everything he admired about the warrior's path. Dory and Buggy had been enemies for a century, but they fought with honor, joy, and an unshakable commitment to their principles. "You fight well for such a small human," Dory laughed as Luffy's Kai-enhanced punch sent a group of agents flying. "Thanks, you're pretty good too," Luffy grinned back. "Hey, want to see something cool?" Before Dory could ask what he meant, Luffy reached out with his Kai and touched the giant's massive hand. Golden energy flowed between them, and suddenly Dory's already incredible strength doubled. "GGYAGYAGYA, this is amazing. Buggy, you have to try this." And that's how the Straw Hat Pirates ended up power-sharing with two legendary giants while fighting an army of Baroque Works agents in the middle of a primordial jungle. It was, Nami reflected as she called down lightning that could have powered a city. Exactly the sort of insane situation that seemed to follow Luffy wherever he went. Having fun, Vivi called out as she used her peacock slashers to cut through a group of agents with impossible speed and precision. The best, Luffy laughed, his power flowing freely between all his allies. This is what fighting should feel like. By the time the dust settled, there weren't many Baroque Works agents left to report back to their superiors. And those who did survive carried a message that would make its way all the way back to Crocodile himself. The Straw Hat Pirates weren't just strong, they made everyone around them stronger. And that was a threat that couldn't be allowed to reach Alabasta. The real war was about to begin. Drum Island, one day before Alabasta, the snow was falling harder now, and Nami's fever was getting worse by the hour. What had started as a simple cold after their fight with the Baroque Works agents had turned into something that left her delirious and burning up despite the freezing temperatures around them. There, Vivi pointed through the blizzard at a castle perched impossibly high on a mountain peak. That's where Dr. Kureha lives. If anyone can help Nami, it's her. Luffy didn't wait for a boat or a proper path. He simply grabbed Nami and Sanji, let his kai flare around them like a protective barrier, and launched himself up the mountainside in a series of impossibly long jumps. "Luffy," Zoro shouted from below. "What about the rest of us?" "Follow the path," Luffy called back. "Meet you at the top." 20 minutes later, he burst through the castle doors carrying his unconscious navigator, his body steaming from the exertion of maintaining his energy shield through the entire climb. "Well, well," an ancient voice cackled. "What do we have here?" Dr. Kureha was exactly what you'd expect from someone with 140 years of medical experience, tiny, wrinkled, and absolutely terrifying when she put her mind to it. But her hands were gentle as she examined Nami, and her diagnosis was swift and accurate. "Kestia fever," she announced. "Caught it from a bug bite in the jungle, most likely. Nasty stuff kills most people within 3 days." "Most people?" Luffy asked, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "I can treat it, but it'll take time and she's going to need constant monitoring." The old woman's sharp eyes studied Luffy intently. "You look like hell, boy. When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep's not important. Nami's important." Kureha continued her examination of both patients. "Interesting energy signature you're carrying. Mind if I take a look?" Before Luffy could ask what she meant, the old woman had pressed some kind of medical instrument against his chest. Numbers flickered across a small screen, and her expression grew increasingly concerned. "Just as I thought, you're burning through your life force at an alarming rate." "What do you mean?" "Those transformations of yours, they don't just use energy, they consume it. Every time you change, every time you share power with others, you're shortening your lifespan." Kureha's voice was blunt but not unkind. "Keep this up, and you'll be dead before your 25th birthday." The words hit Luffy like a physical blow. Not the part about dying, he'd accepted that risk the moment he decided to become a pirate, but the implications for his crew. Is there a way to fix it? Maybe. "But first, I want you to meet someone." That's when a small, blue-nosed reindeer peeked around the corner. He was walking on 2 legs and wearing a tiny doctor's coat, which should have been adorable if not for the obvious terror in his eyes. "It's okay, Chopper," Kureha called gently. "These are patients, not threats." The reindeer Chopper crept closer, studying Luffy with fascination and fear in equal measure. You're a reindeer," Luffy said wonderfully. "That's so cool. Can you really do medicine?" I'm a monster," Chopper whispered. "I ate the human fruit and now I'm neither human nor reindeer. Everyone thinks I'm a freak." Human fruit," Luffy perked up immediately. "I ate one of those too, model Saiyan. What model are you?" Just regular human," Chopper looked confused. "There are different models. Apparently, mine gives me really weird powers." To demonstrate, Luffy let a faint golden glow surround his hand. "See?" Instead of being frightened, Chopper moved closer, his medical curiosity overriding his social anxiety. "Fascinating, your cellular energy output is off the charts, but," he frowned, pulling out a stethoscope. "Your heart rate is irregular, and your muscle tissue shows signs of repeated trauma. Are you in pain?" "Sometimes," Luffy admitted. "After I transform, I feel like I've been hit by a sea king." "That's because you have been, metaphorically speaking," Kureha interjected. "Your body isn't designed to channel that much power. You're lucky you haven't torn yourself apart yet." "Can you help him?" a new voice asked. Sanji had arrived, along with Zoro and Vivi, all of them looking concerned. "I can try. But he'll need constant medical supervision." Kureha looked meaningfully at Chopper, someone who understands both human physiology and devil fruit mutations. Chopper's eyes went wide. You want me to travel with them? I want you to do what you think is right, Kureha replied. But that boy's power is going to change the world one way or another. The question is whether he'll live long enough to see it. Alabasta, port city of Nanohana, the next day the desert heat hit them like a wall the moment they stepped off the ship. Even with Nami stable and recovering thanks to Chopper's treatment, the crew was feeling the strain of their recent battles. This place is in bad shape, Zoro observed, noting the empty market stalls and fearful expressions on the few people they passed. It's worse than I thought, Vivi said quietly. The civil war has torn the country apart. Look at them, they're starving. Indeed, the signs of conflict were everywhere. Shops stood empty, children begged in the streets, and Royal Army patrols moved through the city with the tense alertness of soldiers expecting an attack at any moment. Princess Vivi, a voice called from across the square. They turned to see a man with a large nose and carrying way too many weapons approaching them cautiously. Behind him were several other figures, all trying to look inconspicuous and failing miserably. Igaram, Vivi's face lit up. You made it, barely, Your Highness. The Baroque Works agents have been hunting us across the entire kingdom. Igaram's expression grew serious. I'm afraid the situation has deteriorated since you left. Crocodile has made his move. What do you mean? 3 days ago, he challenged your father to single combat. King Cobra accepted, trying to end the civil war without more bloodshed. Igaram's voice was heavy with sorrow. The fight lasted less than 5 minutes. Vivi went pale. Is he alive, but barely, Crocodile's power? It was unlike anything we'd ever seen. Golden energy, impossible speed, strength that could shatter mountains. Your father never had a chance. Luffy's hands clenched into fists. Where is he now? Crocodile, he's taken over the capital. Alubarna is under his complete control, and he's declared himself the new ruler of Alabasta. Not Crocodile, Luffy's voice was dangerously quiet. Where is Vivi's father? The palace dungeons. Crocodile is keeping him alive as leverage. The golden shimmer started immediately, but this time Chopper was ready for it. Luffy, stop, the little reindeer called out. Your body can't handle another transformation so soon. I don't care, Luffy snarled. He hurt Vivi's dad. And if you burn out your power now, you won't be able to save him later, Chopper said firmly. Trust me, I'm your doctor now. The words had an unexpected effect. Luffy's power stabilized, the golden glow fading to a manageable level. Having someone whose job it was to worry about his health was new, but not unwelcome. He's right, Nami said, still weak but determined to contribute. We need a plan, not just brute force. I may be able to help with that. They all spun around to see a woman with black hair and an elegant blue outfit stepping out of the shadows. She moved with the fluid grace of someone very dangerous, but her expression was calm, almost scholarly. Who are you? Zoro's hand moved to his swords. Someone who has been researching the same artificial enhancements that your captain possesses, she replied. My name is Nico Robin. The name hit Vivi like a thunderbolt. The devil child, the woman with the 79 million berry bounty, guilty as charged. Robin's smile was slight but genuine. Though I prefer to think of myself as an archaeologist with unfortunate circumstances. What do you want? Luffy asked bluntly. To help you stop Crocodile. And to learn more about your unique abilities. Robin's expression grew serious. You see, I've been studying the world government's secret research programs for years. Project Saiyan is just the tip of the iceberg. Project Saiyan, Chopper looked confused. Is that what your fruit is called? It's what the people who created it called it, Robin explained. 20 years ago, the world government discovered genetic samples from an extinct warrior race. They've been trying to recreate that power ever since. You know about Dr. Kaizen, Sanji said. It wasn't a question. I know he's the leading researcher in the field. I also know that 6 months ago, he provided Crocodile with an artificial enhancement based on your captain's DNA. The implications hit the crew like a physical blow. Crocodile hadn't just gained generic power, he'd gained a copy of Luffy's specific abilities. That's why his hair turns golden, Vivi breathed. He's using a stolen version of Luffy's transformations. A corrupted version, Robin corrected. The artificial enhancements lack the emotional stability that makes your captain's power truly dangerous. But what they lose in balance, they gain in raw destructive force. Meaning, Zoro asked. Meaning Crocodile is probably stronger than any of you individually, but he's also completely insane. As if summoned by their conversation, a massive explosion rocked the harbor. Buildings crumbled, the ground shook, and through the dust and smoke, a figure approached that made everyone's blood run cold. Sir Crocodile looked like a nightmare version of everything Luffy could become. His normally slick-back hair was wild and golden, his eyes blazed with unnatural light, and sand swirled around him in impossible patterns. But more than that, there was something wrong with his energy, chaotic, unstable, like a power source on the verge of meltdown. Well, well, his voice carried clearly across the destruction, if it isn't the little princess and her pet pirates. Crocodile, Vivi stepped forward, her weapons drawn. Release my father. Your father is exactly where he deserves to be, Crocodile replied, his golden aura flaring brighter, groveling in a cell while his betters reshaped the world. You're not his better, Luffy said, stepping protectively in front of Vivi. You're just another bully with stolen power. Stolen? Crocodile's laugh was like broken glass. Boy, this power was given to me by people far more intelligent than you could ever comprehend. I am evolution in action. To demonstrate, he raised his hand and fired a blast of golden energy that turned a nearby building to sand. The attack was devastatingly powerful, but Luffy could see the flaws in it, the waste, the lack of control, the way it seemed to hurt Crocodile as much as it helped him. Your power is artificial, Luffy observed. It's eating you alive. All power has a price, Crocodile snarled. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. The battle that erupted shook the entire port city. Crocodile's sand powers, enhanced by artificial Saiyan energy, created massive storms that blotted out the sun. His golden energy blasts carved craters in the earth and melted stone to glass. But Luffy was learning. Instead of trying to match Crocodile's raw power, he focused on precision. His attacks were smaller but more controlled, his movements more efficient. And most importantly, he stayed connected to his crew. Chopper, he called out while dodging another devastating sand blast. How long can I maintain a transformation? At your current stress levels, maybe 10 minutes before you risk serious damage. Zoro. Can you get through his sand defenses? If you can give me an opening. Sanji, those golden energy blasts, do they have a pattern? Yeah, he's favoring his right side. Must be some kind of limitation. This was what artificial power couldn't replicate, Luffy realized. Not just the strength or the speed, but the bonds that turned individual fighters into something greater than the sum of their parts. Robin, he called to their newest ally. You said he was going insane. What are the symptoms? Increasing instability, loss of fine motor control, eventual complete breakdown of the artificial enhancement. How long? Hard to say. Could be minutes, could be hours. Then I guess we'd better speed things up. Luffy's transformation when it came was different from anything they'd seen before. Not the explosive golden aura of his previous battles, but something more controlled. More complete, his hair turned gold, his eyes shifted to green, but the energy around him remained perfectly contained. Impossible, Crocodile gasped. You're just a child. How can you have better control than— Because, Luffy interrupted, moving faster than Crocodile could follow, my power isn't stolen. The punch that connected with Crocodile's jaw sent the warlord flying across the harbor. But instead of pressing his attack, Luffy remained where he was, his golden aura stable and calm. Come back when you learn to control your own strength, he called out to the retreating figure. I'll be waiting. As Crocodile disappeared into the desert, trailing sand and curses, the crew gathered around their captain. Why didn't you finish him? Vivi asked desperately. He still has my father. Because, Luffy said, his transformation fading as he looked toward the distant capital, beating him isn't enough. We need to save your people too. And that's going to take more than just punching things. Robin smiled approvingly. Very wise. Crocodile's artificial enhancement is already breaking down. By the time we reach Alubarna, he'll be even more unstable. And more dangerous, Chopper added worriedly. Luffy, that transformation put incredible strain on your system. If you have to fight him again so soon, then I'll fight him, Luffy said simply. That's what captains do. As they prepared for the journey inland, none of them noticed the small observation device hidden in the ruins of the harbor. It had recorded everything, the battle, the conversation, the casual display of power that had sent one of the 7 warlords retreating. Dr. Kaizen would be very interested in what his creation had learned. And somewhere in the holy land of Marijoa, a celestial dragon with silver hair and enhanced muscles was receiving new orders. Saint Bardac's services were required in Alabasta. The real test was about to begin. The road to Alubarna Alabasta desert, the journey through the desert was brutal. Even with Chopper's medical supplies and Robin's knowledge of the terrain, the heat was relentless, and the sand got into everything. But what made it truly unbearable was the silence. Not the lack of sound, there was plenty of that, between the wind and their footsteps and the occasional complaint from Sanji about the state of his suit. No, it was the emotional silence. The weight of unspoken fears that hung over the group like a storm cloud. Luffy hadn't spoken much since the fight at the harbor. He walked at the front of their small caravan, his straw hat casting a shadow over his face, lost in thoughts that none of them could reach. "He's thinking too hard," Zoro observed quietly to Chopper. "That's never good." "I'm more worried about his physical condition," the little reindeer replied, consulting a small medical device. "His cellular energy is still fluctuating from the transformation. If he has to fight again soon—" "He will," Robin said with certainty. "Crocodile won't give up. And from what I've observed of artificial Saiyan enhancements, the breakdown phase makes them exponentially more dangerous." "Breakdown phase?" Vivi looked alarmed. "The artificial cells can't maintain stability indefinitely. When they start to fail, they release all their stored energy at once." Robin's expression was grim. "Imagine a devil fruit awakening but completely out of control." That got Luffy's attention. He turned back to look at her, his expression more serious than they'd ever seen it. "How long do we have? Hard to say, could be hours, could be days, but the longer he uses the enhancement, the faster it will degrade. And when it does, best case scenario, he loses his artificial powers and reverts to normal. Worst case." Robin paused. "The energy discharge could level half the capital." Luffy was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made everyone stop walking. "Robin, tell me about Project Saiyan. What do you want to know?" "Everything, where it came from, how it works. Why someone thought it was a good idea to put that kind of power into a devil fruit." Robin studied his face carefully before answering. 23 years ago, world government archaeologists discovered ruins on an uninhabited island in the Grand Line. The civilization was ancient, older than the Void Century, but what made it interesting was the genetic samples they found preserved in ice. Genetic samples of what? A warrior race that called themselves Saiyans. According to the few records that survived, they were born fighters. Their power increased through battle, they could transform their bodies to multiply their strength, and they lived for combat above all else. "They sound horrible," Nami said with a shudder. "Not horrible," Robin corrected. "Pure. They had no politics, no complex social structures, no art or science or culture, just the endless pursuit of strength. What happened to them? Unknown. The ruins suggested they destroyed themselves in some final battle, but their genetic legacy was preserved, waiting for someone clever enough to decode it." Luffy absorbed this in silence, then asked the question they were all dreading. "And Dr. Kaizen was that someone?" "He led the research team, yes. Spent 15 years learning to integrate Saiyan DNA with devil fruit creation techniques." Robin's voice became clinical, detached. "The early experiments were unsuccessful. Hundreds of test subjects died before they achieved a stable formula." "Test subjects," Chopper looked horrified. "Volunteers officially. Criminals and prisoners who were offered reduced sentences in exchange for participation." Robin's expression suggested she had personal knowledge of the world government's recruitment methods. "So my power," Luffy said slowly, "comes from the DNA of dead warriors and the suffering of innocent people." "Luffy, no," Vivi said quickly. That's exactly what it is." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm not special, I'm not chosen by fate or destiny or whatever, I'm just a successful experiment." The golden shimmer started around him, but this time it felt different, cold, angry, and completely unstable. "Luffy," Chopper called out in alarm, "your energy levels are spiking." "Good," Luffy snarled, his hair beginning to shift toward gold. "Maybe it's time I acted more like the warrior race I'm supposed to be." "That's not who you are," Zoro said firmly. "Isn't it? Look at me, Zoro. All I do is fight. All I'm good at is violence. Maybe the artificial part isn't the Saiyan DNA, maybe it's everything else." "You saved my village," Nami said desperately. "Because I wanted to fight Arlong." "You recruited me," Chopper added, "because I thought you were cool." "You're helping save my country," Vivi tried, "because I don't like crocodile." "Stop it." Robin's voice cut through their protests like a blade. "You want to know the real difference between you and a true Saiyan?" Luffy turned to glare at her, his transformation deepening. "A true Saiyan would have killed Crocodile in that harbor, would have torn through every marine who got in his way, would have conquered the East Blue instead of making friends in it." Robin's expression was utterly serious. "Your artificial origins don't define you, boy, your choices do. But what if my choices aren't real either? What if they're just programmed responses designed to make me a more effective weapon? Then, a new voice said from the desert around them, "You would be my greatest success." They spun around to find a man in a white lab coat standing on a nearby dune. He was older than Captain Kaizen, with silver hair and eyes that held the cold intelligence of someone who saw the world as a laboratory. "Dr. Kaizen," Robin breathed. "Miss Robin. Still sticking your nose into government business, I see." Dr. Kaizen's smile was completely without warmth. "And you must be my creation." The way he said it, possessive, proprietary, made Luffy's skin crawl. "I'm not your anything," Luffy snarled. "Oh, but you are. Every cell in your body carries my work. Every transformation you've achieved has been guided by my genetic programming. Even your emotional attachments were designed to stabilize the artificial enhancement." "You're lying." "Am I? Tell me, boy, have you ever wondered why you form bonds so easily? Why people trust you despite having every reason not to? Why your crew follows you into impossible situations without question?" Dr. Kaizen's smile widened. "Charisma is a genetic trait just like strength or speed, and I made sure you had plenty of it." The words hit Luffy like physical blows. Every friendship, every alliance, every moment of connection with another person, was it all artificial? Was he just a weapon designed to manipulate others into serving his purposes? "Even if that's true," Zoro said, stepping up beside his captain, "so what?" "So what?" Dr. Kaizen looked amused. "Doesn't it bother you that your loyalty is the result of genetic manipulation?" "No," Zoro said simply, "because loyalty earned is still loyalty, regardless of how the earning happened. And everything Luffy's done to earn mine has been real. As has everything he's done to earn mine," Sanji added, moving to Luffy's other side. "And mine," Nami said firmly. "And mine," Vivi and Chopper said together. "Touching," Dr. Kaizen said dismissively, "but ultimately irrelevant. You see, I didn't come here to debate philosophy. I came to collect my property." "I'm not property. You're a billion-berry investment in genetic research. You're the proof of concept for an entire army of artificial Saiyans. You are absolutely property." Dr. Kaizen pressed something on his wrist, and the sand around them began to shift and move. "And it's time you came home." That's when the real fight began. The Tomb of the Kings Alubarna Royal Cemetery somehow, in the chaos of Dr. Kaizen's attack, they'd ended up in the ancient burial grounds beneath Alubarna. The tomb was massive, a testament to 20 generations of Alabasta royalty. But right now, it was serving as an arena for a battle that would determine the fate of an entire kingdom. Crocodile was waiting for them in the central chamber, and the artificial enhancement had clearly deteriorated further. His golden hair was now almost white, his aura flickered unstably, and there was madness in his eyes that spoke of a mind pushed beyond its breaking point. "Finally," he rasped, his voice distorted by the chaotic energy surrounding him. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost in the desert." "Where is my father?" Vivi demanded, her weapons drawn. "Safe. For now." Crocodile gestured to a massive stone sarcophagus in the center of the chamber. "King Cobra is enjoying the hospitality of his ancestors. Whether he joins them permanently depends on how this conversation goes." "Let him go," Luffy said, his own transformation beginning. "Your fight is with me." "Oh, it's so much more than that now." Crocodile's laugh was like breaking glass. "You see, I've learned some very interesting things about you, Straw Hat. About what you really are." Behind them, Dr. Kaizen watched with scientific fascination as his two subjects prepared to battle. This was exactly what he'd hoped for, a controlled environment where both artificial enhancements could be pushed to their absolute limits. "Did you know," Crocodile continued, "that your power and mine come from the same source? That we're both artificial creatures designed to serve the world government's ambitions." "The difference," Luffy replied, his hair shifting fully to gold, "is that I chose my own path." "Did you? Or did they program you to think you did?" The question hit harder than any physical attack could have. But as Luffy looked around the chamber, at his crew, at Vivi, at the unconscious form of King Cobra, he realized something important. It didn't matter, maybe his charisma was artificial. Maybe his bonds with others were the result of genetic manipulation. Maybe everything he thought he knew about himself was a lie, but the people he'd saved were real. The smiles on their faces when he'd freed them were real. The trust his crew placed in him was real, regardless of how it had started. "You know what?" Luffy said, his transformation stabilizing into something none of them had seen before. Not the explosive power of his previous battles, not the contained energy of his recent fights, but something perfectly balanced. Complete control without sacrificing any strength. "I don't care if I'm artificial." I don't care if my powers were designed in a lab. I don't care if my personality is the result of genetic programming. His voice carried absolute conviction. Because the things I choose to do with those gifts are entirely my own. The golden aura around him pulsed once, then settled into perfect stillness. His hair remained gold, his eyes stayed green, but there was no waste, no instability, no sign of the physical strain that had marked his previous transformations. Impossible, Dr. Kaizen breathed. Complete integration without rejection symptoms. The artificial and natural elements are in perfect harmony. Shut up, Luffy said without looking at him. This is between me and the fake warlord. What followed wasn't really a fight. It was a demonstration of the difference between power earned and power stolen. Crocodile's attacks were devastating but wild. His sandstorms could have leveled buildings, his energy blasts could have vaporized stone, but every technique was out of control, wasteful, ultimately self-destructive. Luffy moved like water, flowing around attacks that should have been impossible to dodge, striking with precise force that accomplished exactly what he intended and nothing more. When Crocodile created a massive sand tornado, Luffy walked through it unharmed. When the warlord fired a blast of golden energy that could have destroyed the entire tomb, Luffy caught it in his bare hands and dispersed it harmlessly. How? Crocodile gasped as his artificial enhancement finally began to fail completely. You're just like me, we're both fake. No, Luffy said, delivering the final punch with no wasted motion, no dramatic flair, just perfect technique. You're a copy, I'm an original. Crocodile went down and stayed down, his artificial enhancement finally burning itself out in a shower of sparks and failing energy. In the aftermath, as they freed King Cobra and tended to their wounds, Dr. Kaizen made his final play. Fascinating data, he said, still taking notes even as his second test subject lay unconscious. The emotional integration hypothesis was correct. Natural bonds do stabilize artificial enhancements. Are you done? Luffy asked tiredly. Oh, not at all. This was just the preliminary test. Now that I understand how your power works, I can begin mass production. Dr. Kaizen smiled. Imagine an entire army of soldiers with your abilities but without your inconvenient conscience. Not happening. I'm afraid you don't have a choice in the matter. You see, I've learned everything I need to know. Your genetic template, your emotional triggers, the precise conditions that allow artificial and natural elements to coexist. Dr. Kaizen began backing toward a hidden exit. Thank you for your cooperation, creation. You've been even more useful than I hoped. Where are you going? Zoro demanded. To build an army that will remake the world. Starting with Saint Bardock, a celestial dragon who volunteered for the complete artificial Saiyan treatment. Unlike you, he has no emotional attachments to limit his potential. And with that, Dr. Kaizen vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the promise of greater conflicts to come. As they helped King Cobra to his feet and prepared to restore order to Alabasta, Luffy found himself thinking about identity, about choice, about the difference between what you are and who you choose to be. Luffy, Vivi said quietly as they emerged from the tomb into the desert sunrise, "Are you okay?" "Yeah," he said, and for the first time in days he meant it. "I think I am, even knowing the truth about your origins, especially knowing the truth." Luffy looked at his crew, at the people who had chosen to follow him despite learning he was artificial. "Because now I know for sure that everything we've built together is real." Robin, watching from nearby, smiled slightly. She'd spent years running from her past, trying to escape the labels and expectations that others had placed on her. Seeing Luffy refuse to let his artificial origins define him was inspiring. "So," she said, approaching the group as they prepared for the journey back to Alubarna, "what happens now?" "Now," Luffy grinned, his usual cheerful demeanor fully restored. "Now we save this kingdom, make sure Vivi's dad is okay, and then we keep heading for the Grand Line. And Dr. Kaizen, he'll keep doing his experiments, and we'll keep stopping him when he hurts innocent people." Luffy's expression grew serious for a moment. "But I'm not going to let fear of what I might be stop me from becoming what I choose to be." As they walked back toward the capital, none of them noticed the small recording device that Dr. Kaizen had left behind. It had captured everything: the battle, the transformation, the complete integration of artificial and natural Saiyan power. Within hours, that data would be transmitted to laboratories across the world. Within days, production would begin on a new generation of artificial Saiyans. And somewhere in the holy land of Marijoa, Saint Bardock was already preparing for his own journey to the Grand Line. He'd seen the recordings, studied the data, and he was very interested in meeting this original artificial creation. The real war was just beginning. Alubarna Palace, 3 days after the tomb battle, the capital was healing. Slowly, painfully, like a broken bone knitting itself back together, but healing nonetheless. The civil war had ended the moment news of Crocodile's defeat spread through the kingdom, and now former enemies were working side by side to rebuild what had been destroyed. Luffy sat on the palace balcony, watching the reconstruction efforts below while absently eating one of the massive meals Sanji had prepared for him. His body was still recovering from the perfect transformation he'd achieved in the tomb, not from injury, but from the sheer energy expenditure of maintaining that level of control. "You're brooding again," Nami observed, settling down beside him with her own plate. "I don't brood, that's Zoro's thing." "Then what do you call sitting alone and staring into the distance while barely touching your food?" Luffy looked down at his plate, surprised to find it still mostly full. "Thinking, I guess, about what Dr. Kaizen said, about a lot of things." Luffy was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you think I'm different from other people, I mean?" "Of course you're different. You can turn your hair gold and punch through mountains." "That's not what I mean." Nami studied his face carefully. In all the time she'd known him, she'd never seen Luffy genuinely question himself like this. It was unsettling, like watching the sun doubt whether it should rise. "You want to know if the way you make friends is real," she said finally. "Yeah, Luffy, look at me." When he met her eyes, her expression was completely serious. "I've spent my entire life learning to read people, figuring out their motivations, their weak points, what they really want. It's how I survived. And you are the most genuinely caring person I've ever met. Artificial charisma might make people like you initially, but it can't make them die for you. It can't make them follow you to the end of the world. That kind of loyalty has to be earned." "But what if, Luffy," her voice was firm. "Stop. You saved my village because you couldn't stand to see me cry. You recruited Chopper because you thought he was interesting and cool. You helped VV because her people were suffering. None of that was manipulation or programming. That was just you." Before Luffy could respond, commotion erupted from the courtyard below. Shouts, running footsteps, the sound of weapons being drawn. They leaned over the balcony to see what was happening. "What the hell is that?" Nami gasped. A figure was walking calmly through the palace gates, completely ignoring the royal guards who were trying to stop him. He was tall, powerfully built, with silver hair that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. But what made him truly terrifying wasn't his size or his obvious strength, it was the complete disdain with which he regarded everyone around him. "A celestial dragon," Vivi breathed, appearing beside them on the balcony. "That's Saint Bardock, the one Dr. Kaizen mentioned." Luffy stood up, his hand instinctively moving to his straw hat. "The same, he's been upgraded with artificial Saiyan enhancements. And unlike Crocodile, he received the complete treatment." As if he'd heard them talking, Saint Bardock looked up at the balcony. When his eyes met Luffy's, he smiled, revealing teeth that had been artificially sharpened to resemble fangs. "Monkey D. Luffy," his voice carried clearly across the courtyard. "The famous artificial Saiyan, I've come a very long way to meet you." "What do you want?" Luffy called back. "To test myself against the original, of course." Saint Bardock's transformation was instant and brutal. His silver hair blazed white, his muscles expanded visibly, and a harsh aura surrounded him like contained lightning. "Dr. Kaizen has told me so much about you." The blast of energy that erupted from his hands turned the palace fountain to slag. Guards scattered in panic as more attacks followed, each one precisely targeted to cause maximum destruction without killing anyone. "He's toying with them," Zoro observed grimly, arriving with Sanji and Chopper close behind. "Not toying," Robin corrected, studying Saint Bardock's movements with professional interest. "Testing. He wants to see how you'll respond. Then I won't keep him waiting." Luffy vaulted over the balcony, landing in the courtyard with enough force to crack the stone beneath his feet. "Luffy, wait," Chopper called out. "Your body isn't ready for another full transformation. Then I guess I'll have to do this differently." What happened next was unlike anything any of them had witnessed before. Luffy didn't transform, his hair stayed black, his eyes remained brown, his aura didn't flare with golden energy. But something fundamental shifted in the way he moved, the way he carried himself, the way he seemed to perceive the world around him. Saint Bardock attacked with devastating force, his enhanced fists creating shockwaves that shattered windows throughout the palace. But somehow, impossibly, Luffy wasn't there when the attacks arrived. He moved with a fluidity that defied explanation, his body seemingly reacting to threats before they even materialized. "What is this?" Saint Bardock snarled, his attacks growing more frenzied as they continued to miss their target. "Stand still and fight," I am fighting, Luffy replied calmly, and his voice held a certainty that none of them had heard before. But I don't need to transform to beat you. Impossible. I have all your power and more. You have a copy of my power, but you don't understand what it really is. Luffy moved then, not with the explosive speed of his golden transformations, but with something far more refined. His fist connected with Saint Bardock's jaw, and the celestial dragon went flying across the courtyard. Power isn't just about strength, Luffy said, as Saint Bardock struggled to his feet. It's not about energy blasts or golden hair or how loud you can scream when you attack. Another strike, this one to the solar plexus. Saint Bardock doubled over, gasping. Real power comes from knowing why you fight. And who you're fighting for. I fight for my own glory, Saint Bardock roared, his artificial enhancement flaring brighter. I am superior to all other beings. No, Luffy said sadly, you fight because someone told you to. Because you've never had a choice in anything your entire life. The truth of those words hit Saint Bardock like a physical blow. He staggered, his transformation flickering as doubt crept into his mind for the first time. I am a world noble. I am chosen by birth to rule over lesser beings. You're just another experiment, just like me. Luffy's voice was gentle now, almost compassionate. The only difference is that I chose my own path. Shut up! Saint Bardock launched himself forward in a desperate attack, pouring all his artificial power into one devastating strike. Luffy caught his fist effortlessly. Not with strength, not with speed, but with perfect timing and complete understanding of his opponent's intentions. The artificial enhancement isn't making you stronger, he said quietly. It's making you weaker. Because you're so focused on the power that you forgot about everything else. With gentle but irresistible force, he turned Saint Bardock's own attack against him. The celestial dragon hit the courtyard wall and slumped to the ground, his artificial transformation fading as unconsciousness claimed him. How? Robin whispered from the balcony above. He didn't transform at all. How did he win so easily? Because, Chopper said with growing excitement, he wasn't fighting with artificial power. He was fighting with perfect instinct. 1 hour later, the palace throne room Saint Bardock sat in chains that had been specially designed to suppress devil fruit abilities, his artificial enhancement completely inert. Across from him, King Cobra and his advisors debated what to do with a captured world noble. We can't execute him, the king said wearily. That would bring the full wrath of the world government down on Alabasta. And we can't let him go, Igaram added. He'll just come back with reinforcements. Actually, Robin interjected, there might be a third option. All eyes turned to her. Which is, the artificial Saiyan enhancement has a fatal flaw that Dr. Kaizen hasn't shared with his subjects. The genetic integration is temporary. Meaning, Vivi asked. Meaning that without constant medical support, the artificial cells will eventually be rejected by the host body. Saint Bardock has maybe 6 months before his enhancement fails completely. And then he'll be just a normal human, powerful by celestial dragon standards perhaps, but not superhuman. King Cobra considered this. So if we can keep him contained until his power fails, he becomes manageable, still dangerous because of his position, but not an existential threat. As they discussed containment options, Luffy found himself studying Saint Bardock's face. Even unconscious, the celestial dragon looked angry, frustrated, like someone who had never encountered a problem he couldn't solve with violence or authority. I feel sorry for him, Luffy said suddenly. Sorry for him? Sanji looked incredulous. He just tried to level the palace. Yeah, but think about it. He's lived his entire life being told he's special, that he's better than everyone else. Then he gets artificial power and thinks that proves it, but deep down he knows it's not real. That doesn't excuse what he did, Nami pointed out. No, it doesn't, but it explains it. Luffy was quiet for a moment. I could have ended up like him. If I hadn't met Shanks, if I hadn't learned that strength is supposed to protect people instead of control them. But you didn't, Zoro said firmly. That's what matters. Yeah, Luffy smiled, and for the first time since learning the truth about his origins, it felt completely genuine. I didn't. The palace garden, that evening the celebration was smaller than the one after Crocodile's defeat, but somehow more meaningful. The core group, the Straw Hats, VV, King Cobra, and a few trusted advisors, sat around a small fire, sharing food and stories and the quiet satisfaction that comes from saving something worth saving. So what happens now? VV asked as the evening wound down. Now we keep sailing, Luffy said simply. There's still a lot of Grand Line left to explore. And Dr. Kaizen, we'll deal with him when we meet him again. But I'm not going to spend my whole life running from what I am or worrying about what he might do. Speaking of what you are, Robin said, settling down beside the group, I've been thinking about what happened during your fight with Saint Bardock. Oh, that wasn't just superior technique. You were moving with perfect prediction, like you could see his attacks before he made them. It felt like that, yeah, like I knew exactly what he was going to do and how to counter it. That's not possible with artificial Saiyan enhancement alone. But if you were somehow integrating observation haki with your Kai control. Haki, Chopper looked confused. What's haki? A power that exists in all living beings, Robin explained. Most people never learn to access it, but those who do can achieve incredible things. Observation haki lets you sense intentions and predict attacks. Armament haki can turn your body into armor. And there's a third type. What kind? Conqueror's haki, the ability to impose your will on others. It's extremely rare, maybe 1 in a million people have it. Luffy thought about this. Do you think I have it? I think you have all 3 types, and your artificial Saiyan cells are somehow amplifying them. That perfect instinct you displayed, that was observation haki enhanced by Kai control. And the way Saint Bardock hesitated when you talked about choice, that might have been unconscious use of Conqueror's haki. So I'm not just an artificial Saiyan. I'm an artificial Saiyan with natural haki abilities. Which makes you, Robin smiled, completely unique. There's never been anyone like you before, and there probably never will be again. Good, Luffy said with satisfaction. I like being unique. As the evening progressed and the others began to drift off to bed, Robin found herself walking with Luffy through the palace gardens. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Sure, why did you trust me so quickly? Most people take one look at my bounty and assume I'm dangerous. You are dangerous, Luffy replied matter-of-factly, but so are all my friends. That doesn't make you a bad person. How can you be so sure? Luffy stopped walking and looked at her seriously. Because I've learned to trust my instincts about people. And my instincts say you've been running and hiding for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to have somewhere to belong. The words hit her like a physical blow. After 20 years of isolation, of being hunted and feared and used by others, someone had seen past her reputation to the lonely person underneath. If I joined your crew, she said carefully, it would make you all targets. The world government has been hunting me for decades. They're already hunting us, might as well be hunted together. I'm not looking for charity or pity. Good, because I'm not offering either, I'm offering friendship. And maybe, if you want it, a chance to find what you've been looking for. Which is the true history, right? The Void Century, all those mysteries you've been trying to solve, Luffy grinned. I bet the One Piece is connected to all of that somehow, so if you help us find it, maybe you'll get your answers too. Robin stared at him for a long moment, then began to laugh. Not the bitter, cynical laughter she'd perfected over the years, but something genuine and surprised and hopeful. You know what? She said finally. I think I'd like that. Marine headquarters, the next morning Fleet Admiral Sengoku stared at the reports on his desk with the expression of a man watching his carefully laid plans explode in spectacular fashion. Saint Bardock captured, Crocodile defeated, Dr. Kaizen's research facility in Alabasta completely destroyed, and at the center of it all, one 17-year-old pirate whose bounty was about to increase dramatically. Sir, his aide said carefully, Admiral Kizaru is requesting permission to pursue the Straw Hat pirates personally. Denied, Sengoku said immediately. We can't afford to lose another high-ranking officer to that boy's abilities. Then what do you recommend? Sengoku looked at the photographs from Alabasta Luffy fighting Saint Bardock without transforming, moving with impossible precision, winning through pure skill rather than overwhelming power. Put together a special task force, experienced officers only, no rookies, and make sure they understand they're not hunting a normal pirate. Sir, they're hunting something that might be the most dangerous individual on the Grand Line. And he's getting stronger every day. As orders went out across the marine network, setting in motion the largest manhunt in decades, the Straw Hat pirates sailed away from Alabasta toward their next adventure. They had no idea that their actions had convinced the world government they were no longer just pirates to be captured. They were a threat to be eliminated. The real war was about to begin. Sabaody archipelago. 1 week after Alabasta, the grove was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Massive mangrove trees stretching up toward the sky, their roots creating a network of islands connected by bubbles that defied all logic. Everywhere they looked, there were wonders that shouldn't exist: bubble cars floating through the air, buildings growing directly from tree bark, attractions that seem to blend nature and technology in impossible ways. "This place is amazing," Luffy declared, already trying to catch one of the floating bubbles. "Look, they don't pop when you touch them." "That's because they're coated with the tree's natural resin," Robin explained, consulting a guidebook she'd acquired somewhere. "Sabaody is famous for its bubble coating industry. Pirates use it to dive to Fishman Island." "Fishman Island?" Chopper's eyes went wide. "There's a whole island underwater, 10,000 meters below the surface," Nami confirmed, checking her log pose. "That's our next destination." But their sightseeing was interrupted by commotion from the nearby auction house. Screams, the sound of breaking glass, and underneath it all, a sound that made Luffy's blood run cold, the crack of whips and the cries of people in chains. "Slave auction," Sanji said grimly, his expression darkening. "They sell people here," Vivi looked horrified. "It's legal in Sabaody," Robin explained, though her voice held obvious distaste. "The world government allows it because the island is technically neutral territory." "Like hell it's neutral," Zoro growled, his hand moving to his swords. "Luffy," Nami said carefully, recognizing the dangerous stillness that had come over their captain, "we should be careful. This place is crawling with marines and bounty hunters." "Good," Luffy said, and his voice carried that edge that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Maybe they'll try to stop me." Before anyone could argue, he was already walking toward the auction house, his crew hurrying to keep up. Human auction house, Grove 1. The scene inside the auction house was everything Luffy had feared and worse. Dozens of people in chains on a stage, being bid on like merchandise, while an audience of wealthy buyers laughed and made casual conversation about their purchases. "Lot 16, the auctioneer announced cheerfully. "A mermaid from Fishman Island. Bidding starts at 500,000 berries." The mermaid in question was young, maybe 16, with tears streaming down her face as she tried to maintain some dignity despite her circumstances. The crowd roared with excitement, bids climbing rapidly. That's when Luffy's transformation began. It wasn't the explosive golden aura they were used to. This time his power built slowly, deliberately, like a storm gathering strength. His hair didn't change color, his eyes remained brown, but energy began to crackle around him in ways that made the air itself seem dangerous. 1,000,000 berries, he said clearly, his voice somehow carrying over the crowd's noise. The auction house fell silent. All eyes turned to the young man in the straw hat who had just outbid half the room. "Sir," the auctioneer said nervously, "do you have proof of funds?" "I don't need money," Luffy replied, standing up. "Because I'm not buying her, I'm freeing her." "Security," someone shouted, but the guards who moved toward Luffy stopped dead when they felt the pressure radiating from him. "Everyone out," Luffy said calmly. "Buyers, guards, staff. You have 30 seconds. You can't just," the auctioneer started. 29, 28, 27. The golden shimmer was starting now, barely visible but unmistakably there. People began to move toward the exits, some walking quickly, others running outright. "Luffy," Robin called softly, "there are marines surrounding the building." "Good, let them come." By the time he reached 0, the auction house was empty except for the Straw Hat pirates and the terrified people still chained on stage. Luffy walked calmly to the platform and began breaking chains with his bare hands. "It's okay," he said gently to the mermaid, his voice completely different from the dangerous tone he'd used with the crowd. "You're safe now? Thank you," she whispered. "But they'll just capture me again, and now they'll hunt you too. Let them try." That's when the real trouble started. The auction house doors exploded inward, and through the smoke and debris walked a figure that made everyone's blood run cold. Tall, thin, wearing the distinctive yellow-striped suit and cape of a marine admiral. When he moved, he seemed to flicker, like light refracting through a prism. "Borsal I know," Robin breathed. "Admiral Kizaru." "Ooh, scary," Kizaru said in his characteristic drawl, though his tone suggested he was anything but concerned. "Monkey D. Luffy, I presume. You've been causing quite a stir lately." "Admiral," Luffy replied carefully. He could feel the power radiating from this man, not artificial like Crocodile or Saint Bardock, but something natural and devastating. "You know, I was planning to take a vacation after all the paperwork from Alabasta. But then Fleet Admiral Sengoku specifically requested that I handle this situation personally." Kizaru raised one finger, and light began to gather at the tip. "Something about you being too dangerous to ignore. I'm not looking for a fight with the Marines," Luffy said honestly. "I just wanted to free these people." "Oh, but that's the problem, you see. You can't just go around freeing slaves and defeating warlords and capturing celestial dragons. It sets a bad precedent." The light at Kizaru's fingertip compressed into a brilliant point. Nothing personal, but you need to disappear. The beam that erupted from his finger moved at the speed of light. Luffy wasn't there when it arrived. Ooh, interesting, Kizaru mused, looking at the smoking crater where Luffy had been standing. Lightspeed movement, how did you manage that? Luffy reappeared behind him, moving faster than anyone except Kizaru himself could follow. His punch, enhanced by Kai and thrown at incredible speed, should have connected with devastating force. Kizaru's body turned to light, the attack passing harmlessly through him. My turn, the Admiral said pleasantly. What followed was unlike any fight the crew had witnessed. Both combatants moved at speeds that made them blur, exchanging attacks that carved craters in the floor and walls. But where previous opponents had been overwhelmed by Luffy's raw power, Kizaru matched him technique for technique. You're fast, Kizaru observed conversationally as he dodged another devastating punch, but light will always be faster than matter. Maybe, Luffy replied, his own movement becoming more refined with each exchange, but matter can be in multiple places at once if it moves fast enough. To demonstrate, he seemed to split into multiple copies of himself, each one attacking from a different angle. Kizaru's light-based defenses barely managed to keep up. Now that's impressive, the Admiral admitted, but you're missing something important about lightspeed combat, which is precision. Kizaru's next attack wasn't a beam or an explosion, but thousands of tiny light particles that moved in perfect formation. Each one was individually weak, but together they created a cage of energy that even Luffy's enhanced speed couldn't escape. Checkmate, Kizaru said with satisfaction. That's when Luffy's crew made their move. Robin, Nami shouted. Now, mille fleur, gigantesco mano. Giant hands sprouted from every surface in the auction house, not attacking Kizaru directly but creating enough chaos to disrupt his light prison. Santo Ryu, Tatsumaki. Zoro's tornado technique scattered the remaining light particles while Sanji launched himself at Kizaru from an unexpected angle. Teamwork, Kizaru said approvingly, easily avoiding their attacks, but ultimately futile against an admiral's power. Maybe, Luffy said, and his voice carried a new certainty. But you taught me something important. Did I now? Yeah, speed without precision is just flashy movement, but precision without purpose is just showing off. The transformation that followed was subtle but unmistakable. Luffy's hair remained black, his eyes stayed brown, but his entire body seemed to take on a faint golden glow. More importantly, his movements became perfectly efficient. No wasted motion, no excess energy, just pure technique enhanced by impossible speed. Interesting, Kizaru murmured. You're integrating your Kai with something else. What is it? My friends, Luffy replied simply, and it was true. Instead of fighting alone, he was moving in perfect coordination with his crew. When Zoro created an opening, Luffy was there to exploit it. When Sanji distracted Kizaru, Luffy struck from the blind spot. When Robin or Nami or Chopper created even the smallest advantage, Luffy turned it into a decisive attack. For the first time in years, Admiral Kizaru found himself being pushed back. This is unprecedented, he said, genuine surprise creeping into his voice. You're not just fast, you're thinking at light speed too. I'm not thinking at all, Luffy corrected. I'm trusting. Trusting what? My crew, my instincts, my friends. Luffy's next attack was so fast that even Kizaru barely managed to dodge it. All the things you can't replicate with just power. The battle was reaching its climax when the auction house doors exploded inward for a second time. Through the smoke came a figure that made everyone freeze in recognition and horror. Dr. Kaizen stood in the doorway, but he wasn't alone. Beside him was what could only be described as the perfect artificial Saiyan, tall, muscular, with silver hair and eyes that held no emotion whatsoever. Unlike every other enhanced individual they'd encountered, this one showed no signs of instability or artificial augmentation side effects. Subject 0, Dr. Kaizen announced proudly. My first successful creation and still my greatest achievement. Another artificial Saiyan? Kizaru asked, though he didn't lower his guard. Not artificial, Dr. Kaizen corrected, perfected. All of the original's power with none of the emotional dependencies. No friends to worry about, no moral qualms to limit his potential, no pesky humanity to get in the way. Subject Zero's transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. His hair blazed silver white, his aura erupted in a column of harsh energy that made the building shake, and when he moved, he left cracks in reality itself. This is what you could have been, Dr. Kaizen said to Luffy. Pure power undiluted by weakness. That's not power, Luffy replied, his own transformation deepening in response to the threat. That's just destruction. Exactly. The fight that erupted involved three of the most powerful individuals in the world, each representing a different approach to strength. Kizaru's lightspeed techniques, perfected through decades of experience. Subject Zero's raw artificial power, unrestrained by any human concerns. And Luffy's integrated abilities, balanced between natural talent and artificial enhancement, stabilized by bonds with others. The auction house didn't survive the first exchange. As the building collapsed around them, the battle spilled out onto the streets of Sabaody. Civilians fled in terror while Marines tried desperately to contain the destruction. Trees that had stood for centuries were reduced to splinters in seconds. "This is getting out of hand," Robin shouted over the sound of explosions. "We need to get out of here," Nami called back. "The whole archipelago is going to be destroyed." But Luffy was locked in combat with Subject Zero, and neither fighter seemed willing or able to disengage. They were perfectly matched, every technique met with an equal counter, every attack blocked or avoided by the narrowest of margins. "You're holding back," Subject Zero observed in a voice completely devoid of emotion. "Why?" "Because," Luffy replied, dodging a blast that would have vaporized him, "I don't want to hurt innocent people. Weakness, humanity, same thing." That's when Kizaru made his decision. "This has gone far enough," he said, and for the first time since arriving, his voice carried real concern. Yada no Kagami, the Admiral moved at pure light speed, not attacking but positioning himself between the two Saiyans with a barrier of compressed photons. "Dr. Kaizen," he called out, "recall your weapon before it destroys the entire island." "Why would I do that? This is valuable combat data." "Because," Kizaru's voice carried the full authority of his rank, "if Sabaody is destroyed, the world government will hold you personally responsible. And I don't think even your research value will protect you from that." Dr. Kaizen's expression suggested he'd just realized the full implications of letting his creation run wild in such a public location. With obvious reluctance, he activated some kind of control device. "Subject Zero, return to base. We have what we came for." The artificial Saiyan stopped mid-attack, his expression never changing. Without a word, he powered down and walked calmly to his creator's side. "This isn't over," Dr. Kaizen called to Luffy as they departed. "You've seen what perfected power looks like. Next time, there won't be any Marines here to save you." As they vanished into the chaos of the destroyed grove, Kizaru turned his attention back to the Straw Hat Pirates. "Well," he said in his characteristic drawl, "that was educational." "Are you going to arrest us?" Luffy asked, breathing heavily from the exertion of fighting two opponents simultaneously. "Honestly, I'm not sure I could, even if I wanted to." Kizaru looked around at the destruction surrounding them. "You fought me to a standstill while protecting your crew and keeping that artificial monster from leveling the entire archipelago. That's not something I see every day. So I'm going to give you a head start, not because I approve of your methods, but because the alternative is worse." Kizaru's expression grew serious. "That thing Kaizen created, Subject Zero, it's exactly what you could become if you lose your humanity. Don't let that happen." With that warning, the Admiral departed in a flash of light, leaving the Straw Hat Pirates alone in the ruins of Grove 1. "Well," Sanji said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands, "that was intense." "Is everyone okay?" Chopper asked, immediately shifting into doctor mode. "Physically, yes," Robin replied. "But we now have confirmation that Dr. Kaizen has successfully created artificial Saiyans without the emotional dependencies that limit their power." "Which means," Nami asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Which means," Luffy said grimly, "we're going to be dealing with more of them. And next time, they might not be interested in just testing themselves." As they prepared to leave Sabaody behind and begin their journey to Fishman Island, none of them noticed the small recording devices that had captured every moment of the three-way battle. Within hours, footage of the fight would be transmitted to every major power in the world. The age of artificial Saiyans was beginning, and somewhere in his laboratory, Dr. Kaizen was already preparing Subject 1 through Subject 10 for deployment. The real war was finally at hand. Approaching Fishman Island, 2 days after Sabaody, the bubble coating held perfectly as the Going Merry descended through the dark waters toward Fishman Island. 10,000 meters below the surface, surrounded by the crushing depths of the ocean, the crew should have felt isolated, vulnerable. Instead, they felt hunted. "3 ships on our tail," Nami reported, studying the sonar readings Robin had helped her interpret. "They've been following us since we left Sabaody." "Marines?" Zoro asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Something worse." Robin's expression was grim as she studied the approaching vessels through a periscope. World Government Special Forces, and they're using bubble coating too advanced for normal marine technology. Dr. Kaizen, Luffy guessed. Almost certainly, which means, Robin paused, focusing the periscope on the lead ship. Oh no, what is it? Saint Bardock, he's on the deck of the lead vessel and she stepped back from the periscope, her face pale. He's been enhanced again, extensively. Luffy took a look for himself, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The celestial dragon they'd fought in Alabasta was barely recognizable. His body had been surgically modified with mechanical components that pulsed with energy. His silver hair now had wires running through it, connecting to devices implanted in his skull. Most disturbing of all, his eyes had been replaced with artificial optics that glowed with the same harsh light as his artificial Saiyan aura. They turned him into a cyborg, Chopper whispered in horror. Not just a cyborg, Robin corrected. A weapon. Those modifications are designed to stabilize and enhance artificial Saiyan power indefinitely. Can he still think for himself? Vivi asked. I don't know. And I'm not sure I want to find out. That's when the first attack came. The energy beam that lanced through the water was impossibly precise, punching through their bubble coating without destroying it and barely missing the Mary's main mast. A warning shot, Monkei de Luffy, Saint Bardock's voice carried clearly through the water, amplified by the mechanical enhancements. Surrender now and your crew will be spared. Like hell, Luffy called back, his own voice somehow carrying just as far. What did they do to you? They perfected me, removed all weaknesses, all doubt, all unnecessary emotion. Saint Bardock's transformation was visible even at this distance. Not the flickering, unstable enhancement from before, but something smooth and mechanical. I am what you could become if you abandoned your pathetic attachments. And if I refuse, then I will take you by force. The battle that erupted in the depths of the ocean was unlike anything the Grand Line had ever seen. 3 ships engaged in combat while maintaining perfect bubble coating, energy attacks cutting through water that should have dispersed them. And at the center of it all, 2 enhanced humans fighting at speeds that turned them into blurs of golden and silver light. But this wasn't the same Saint Bardock they'd fought before. The mechanical enhancements had eliminated every weakness in his artificial Saiyan power, giving him perfect control, unlimited endurance, and most terrifyingly, complete emotional detachment. You're different, Luffy observed as they exchanged devastating blows that sent shockwaves through the water. I'm better, Saint Bardock replied without emotion, no longer hindered by doubt or compassion or the need for others' approval. That's not better. That's just empty. Empty of weakness, yes. Their fight was interrupted by another voice, one that made everyone freeze despite the ongoing battle. Well now, this is quite the reunion. Admiral Kizaru descended from above in a bubble of his own, his light-based powers somehow functioning perfectly even in the crushing depths. But he wasn't alone. Beside him floated a massive mechanical suit piloted by someone whose presence made the water itself seem to recoil. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, Robin breathed. In his Buddha form, Sanji added grimly. This is bad, Monkey D. Luffy, Sengoku's voice boomed across the battlefield. By order of the world government, you are under arrest for crimes against the established order of the world. What crimes? Luffy shot back, even as he continued fighting Saint Bardock. Existing, Sengoku replied bluntly. Your very presence threatens the balance we've maintained for 800 years. You represent a power that could overthrow governments, destroy the established order, inspire others to believe they can change the world. So you must be eliminated. Before you realize what you're truly capable of. That's when the real battle began. 3 of the most powerful individuals in the world, each representing a different philosophy of strength. Sengoku's ordered justice, perfected through decades of experience and absolute belief in the system. Saint Bardock's artificial perfection, enhanced beyond human limitations but stripped of all humanity. And Luffy's integrated power, balanced between natural talent and artificial enhancement, strengthened by his connections to others. The ocean around them turned into a war zone. Energy attacks that could level mountains cut through the water. Shockwaves that could shatter islands propagated in all directions. And through it all, 3 different visions of what ultimate power should look like clashed with devastating force. But Luffy was outmatched. Not in raw strength, he could hold his own against either opponent individually. But fighting both simultaneously while protecting his crew and maintaining their bubble coating was pushing him beyond his limits. Luffy, Nami called out as a combined attack from Sengoku, and Saint Bardock sent him crashing into the Mary's deck. You can't keep this up. I know, he gasped, blood running from a dozen wounds. But I can't let them hurt you guys either. Then don't. The voice came from Zoro, but it was echoed by every member of the crew. Don't what? Don't protect us, Sanji said firmly. We're not helpless passengers anymore. We're your crew, trust us to protect ourselves, Robin added, and focus on what you do best. Which is fighting for what you believe in, Chopper said with absolute conviction. That's when something clicked inside Luffy's mind. All this time, he'd been thinking of his power as something he needed to control, to limit, to carefully balance so it wouldn't hurt the people around him. But what if that was backwards? What if his power wasn't meant to be contained? What if it was meant to be shared? The transformation that followed was unlike anything any of them had witnessed. Luffy's hair turned gold, his eyes shifted to green, his aura blazed with incredible force. But instead of staying contained around his body, it reached out like golden threads to touch each member of his crew. What is this? Sengoku gasped as he felt the massive surge in power levels throughout the enemy ship. This, Luffy said, and his voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had finally understood their true purpose, is what happens when you threaten my family. What followed wasn't just a fight, it was a demonstration of what a truly unified crew could accomplish. Each Straw Hat fought with abilities far beyond their normal limits, enhanced by Luffy's power, but also by their absolute trust in each other. Zoro's swords cut through energy itself. Sanji's kicks created shockwaves that parted the ocean. Nami's weather control reached the scale of natural disasters. Robin's sprouted limbs were strong enough to grapple with giants. Chopper's transformations rivaled those of legendary Zoan users. And at the center of it all, Luffy fought not just with his own strength, but with the combined will of everyone who believed in him. Impossible, Saint Bardock screamed, his mechanical enhancements struggling to process the power readings. You're just one person. You can't be stronger than perfected artificial enhancement. You're right, Luffy replied, landing a punch that sent the cyborg celestial dragon flying through the water. I'm not one person, I'm all of us. That's cheating, Sengoku roared, his Buddha form's shock waves trying to disrupt the connection between Luffy and his crew. That's friendship, Luffy corrected. The battle was reaching its climax when something unexpected happened. Saint Bardock's mechanical enhancements, pushed beyond their design limits by the intensity of the fight, began to malfunction. Sparks flew from his implants, his artificial optics flickered, and for the first time since his conversion, genuine emotion appeared on his face. Pain, help me, he gasped, his voice no longer mechanically enhanced but purely human. The machines, they're burning me from the inside. Without hesitation, Luffy broke off his attack on Sengoku and moved to Saint Bardock's side. Luffy, don't, Nami called out. It could be a trap, look at him, Luffy replied gently. He's not faking this. Indeed, Saint Bardock was convulsing as his artificial enhancements went into catastrophic failure. The power that had made him superhuman was now literally consuming him from within. I can help, Luffy said, reaching out with his Kai, but you have to let me. Why? Saint Bardock gasped. Why would you help someone who tried to kill you? Because, Luffy said simply, that's what strength is really for. The golden energy that flowed from Luffy into Saint Bardock wasn't an attack or an enhancement, it was pure healing power, his Kai working to stabilize the failing artificial systems and ease the celestial dragon's pain. I don't understand, Saint Bardock whispered as the agony subsided. You're supposed to be my enemy. You were never my enemy, Luffy replied. You were just someone who got lost and needed help finding their way home. This is unprecedented, Sengoku said quietly, lowering his fists as he watched the scene unfold. In 40 years of service, I've never seen anything like this. Like what? A pirate showing mercy to someone who tried to destroy him, genuine compassion for an enemy's suffering. Sengoku's mechanical Buddha form began to power down. You really aren't like other threats we've faced, are you? I'm not a threat at all, Luffy said honestly. I just want to sail the seas with my friends and help people when I can. And if the world government tries to stop you, then I'll keep doing it anyway. Sengoku was quiet for a long moment, studying Luffy's face. Finally, he spoke. Fleet Admiral's orders were to eliminate you at all costs, but those orders were based on the assumption that you were a monster driven by artificial power. He paused. I'm beginning to think our intelligence was incomplete. Does that mean you'll let us go? It means, Sengoku said carefully, that I need to file a very interesting report when I get back to headquarters, one that might change how the world government views certain threats. As the three ships began to separate, Saint Bardock, his mechanical enhancements now safely deactivated thanks to Luffy's intervention, made a decision that surprised everyone. I renounce my title as a celestial dragon, he announced to the world via Den Den Mushi. I hereby reject the world government's authority over me and declare my independence from their corrupt system. Saint Bardock, Sengoku said in shock, do you understand what you're saying? I understand that true nobility isn't about birth or power or the right to rule over others, Saint Bardock replied, looking directly at Luffy. It's about having the strength to help those who need it, even when they don't deserve it. As the government ships departed, leaving the Straw Hat Pirates alone in the depths once again, the crew gathered around their captain. That was incredible, Vivi breathed, the way you shared your power with all of us. It wasn't sharing, Luffy corrected with a grin. It was just finally understanding what my power was really for. Which is, Robin asked, making sure nobody has to fight alone. As they continued their journey toward Fishman Island, none of them noticed the small recording device that Saint Bardock had left behind as a parting gift. It contained complete schematics for Dr. Kaizen's artificial enhancement procedures, detailed information about Project Saiyan, and most importantly, evidence of the world government's illegal human experimentation programs. It was, he figured, the least he could do for the pirate who had shown him what real strength looked like. The revolution was beginning. Fishman Island, the royal palace, the underwater kingdom, was in chaos. What should have been a peaceful stop to resupply and explore had turned into something far more sinister, when Dr. Kaizen's research fleet had surrounded the island like a pack of hungry sharks. 50 ships, Nami reported grimly, studying the tactical display King Neptune's forces had provided, all carrying artificial Saiyan subjects. How many subjects total? Robin asked, though her expression suggested she already feared the answer. Conservative estimate, 200, maybe more. Nami's voice was tight with worry. And unlike the ones we've faced before, these appear to be mass-produced. Identical power signatures, identical transformations. Luffy stood at the massive window overlooking the underwater city, watching as Dr. Kaizen's forces took position around Fishman Island's protective bubble. His reflection in the glass showed a young man who looked older than his 18 years, marked by battles that had taught him hard truths about power and responsibility. They're not here for the island, he said quietly. They're here for me, obviously, Zoro replied, checking his swords for the dozenth time. Question is, what do we do about it? We fight, Sanji said, lighting a cigarette with hands that were perfectly steady despite the impossible odds. We can't, Chopper said desperately. Luffy's still recovering from the battle with Sengoku and Saint Bardock. Another major transformation could kill him. Then we don't let him transform, Vivi said firmly. We protect him while he protects everyone else. Noble sentiment, a familiar voice drawled from the palace entrance, but ultimately impractical against those odds. They all spun to see Admiral Kizaru walking calmly into the throne room, his hands raised peacefully. Behind him, to everyone's surprise, was Saint Bardock, no longer in celestial dragon robes, but wearing simple clothes that made him look almost human. What are you doing here? King Neptune demanded, his massive trident at the ready. Officially, I'm here to arrest the Straw Hat Pirates on behalf of the world government. Kizaru's tone was conversational, almost bored. Unofficially, I'm here because Dr. Kaizen's little army represents a threat to everyone on this planet. Including the world government? Robin asked pointedly. Especially the world government. You see, artificial Saiyans don't follow orders very well once they realize how powerful they are. Dr. Kaizen thinks he can control them, but Kizaru shrugged. History suggests otherwise. So you want to team up? Luffy asked directly. I want to prevent the end of civilization as we know it, Kizaru corrected. If that requires temporarily allying with pirates, well, desperate times call for desperate measures. And you, Luffy looked at Saint Bardock. Why are you here? Because, the former celestial dragon said simply, you showed me what real strength looks like. Now I want to help you show the world. Before anyone could respond, the palace's communication system crackled to life. Dr. Kaizen's face appeared on screens throughout the room, his expression radiating cold satisfaction. Greetings, Fishman Island. I am Dr. Kaizen, and I'm here to collect what belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you, King Neptune replied angrily. On the contrary, Your Majesty. That young man in the straw hat is my greatest creation, and I'm afraid I need him back. The research applications are simply too valuable to ignore. Research applications? Luffy stepped forward, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Oh yes, you see, my artificial Saiyan project has been quite successful, but there's still one element missing. The emotional integration that makes your power stable. I need to study your brain, your genetic structure, your cellular composition. Dr. Kaizen's smile was utterly without warmth. Don't worry, I'll try to keep you alive during the process. And if we refuse, Then I'll demonstrate what 200 artificial Saiyans can accomplish when they're not limited by pesky concepts like mercy or restraint. As if to emphasize his point, the research fleet began powering up. Energy readings spiked across all 50 ships as their artificial Saiyan subjects prepared for battle. "You have 1 hour to surrender," Dr. Kaizen announced. "After that, I'll simply take what I want from the ruins." The transmission ended, leaving the throne room in tense silence. "Well," Kizaru said finally, "this should be interesting." Fishman Island Harbor. 55 minutes later, the defensive preparations had been swift but thorough. Fishman Island's Royal Guard took positions around the protective bubble's weak points. The Straw Hat Pirates prepared for what might be their final battle. And in an alliance that would have been unthinkable days earlier, Admiral Kizaru and former Saint Bardock stood ready to fight alongside the pirates they'd once tried to capture. "Remember," Luffy said as they took their positions, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who can't fight back, everyone who's been hurt by these artificial power experiments, everyone who deserves to live free." "Inspiring speech," Kizaru observed. "Think it'll make a difference against 200 enhanced warriors?" "It'll make all the difference," Luffy replied with absolute conviction. That's when the attack began. The artificial Saiyans descended on Fishman Island like a golden plague. Each one was identical, perfect replicas of enhanced human physiology, with silver hair, white eyes, and absolutely no individual personality or restraint. They moved in perfect formation, their attacks coordinated with mechanical precision. But they weren't facing ordinary defenders. Yata no Kagami, Kizaru moved at light speed, creating barriers of compressed photons that deflected the first wave of energy attacks. Cyborg Cannon, Saint Bardock's remaining mechanical enhancements, channeled his reformed artificial Saiyan power into devastating counterstrikes. Gomu no, Luffy paused, then grinned. "Actually, let's try something new. Saiyan Gear 4th. The transformation that followed was unlike anything they'd seen before. Instead of the golden aura surrounding just Luffy, it expanded to encompass his entire crew. Each Straw Hat found themselves enhanced far beyond their normal capabilities, their individual strengths multiplied by their connection to their captain. "This is incredible," Chopper laughed as his monster point transformation grew to truly gigantic proportions. "I can feel all of your strength flowing through me," Nami called out as her weather attacks reached the scale of natural disasters. But the artificial Saiyans adapted quickly. They began targeting the connections between Luffy and his crew, trying to disrupt the power-sharing network that made the Straw Hats so formidable. "Clever," Dr. Kaizen's voice echoed across the battlefield from his command ship. "But ultimately futile. You see, I've studied your power extensively. I know exactly how to counter it." A new wave of artificial Saiyans descended, but these were different. Instead of silver hair, they had golden locks that exactly matched Luffy's transformation. Instead of white eyes, they had the same green glow that marked his enhanced state. "Perfect copies," Robin breathed in horror. "He's replicated your exact abilities." "Not copies," Dr. Kaizen corrected gleefully. "Improvements. All of your power, none of your weaknesses. No emotional dependencies, no need for friends or bonds or any of the sentimental nonsense that limits your potential." The battle that followed was the most desperate of their lives. The improved artificial Saiyans matched every technique Luffy could produce, countered every strategy his crew attempted, and showed no signs of fatigue or hesitation. But they were missing something crucial. "They're fighting like individuals," Zoro observed during a brief lull in the combat. "Perfect individuals but still alone. That's the difference," Luffy realized. "They can copy my power, but they can't copy what makes it special. Which is the fact that it's not mine alone." Luffy reached out, not just to his crew this time, but to everyone fighting alongside them. His power flowed to Kizaru, enhancing the Admiral's light-speed abilities beyond their normal limits. It reached Saint Bardock, stabilizing his artificial enhancements and making them more efficient than Dr. Kaizen's original design. It even touched the Fishman soldiers, giving them strength to stand against opponents who should have been far beyond their capabilities. "Impossible," Dr. Kaizen screamed from his command ship. "You can't enhance that many people simultaneously. The power requirements alone should kill you." "Maybe they would," Luffy admitted, his voice carrying clearly across the battlefield despite the chaos around them, "if I was doing this alone. But I'm not." The golden energy that surrounded the defenders wasn't coming just from Luffy anymore. Each person he'd enhanced was contributing their own strength back to the network, creating a feedback loop that grew stronger with every participant. This is what you never understood about power, Luffy called out to Dr. Kaizen. It's not about being the strongest individual. It's about making everyone around you stronger too. The artificial Saiyans, for all their perfected abilities, had no answer for this kind of coordinated strength. They were designed to fight as superior individuals, not to match the combined will of people fighting for something greater than themselves. One by one, they began to fall. This is impossible. Dr. Kaizen's composure finally cracked as he watched his perfect army being defeated by what should have been vastly inferior opponents. 20 years of research, billions of berries in funding. You're just one pirate crew. We're not just one crew, Luffy replied, his power flowing freely between dozens of allies. We're everyone who refuses to let you hurt innocent people. Everyone who believes that strength should protect, not dominate. Everyone who knows that the world is better when we help each other instead of fighting alone. That's when the final phase of the battle began. Dr. Kaizen, in a last desperate gambit, activated every remaining artificial Saiyan simultaneously. The power surge was enormous, easily enough energy to destroy Fishman Island and everyone on it. But instead of coordinated attacks, the artificial warriors simply exploded with uncontrolled force. If I can't have my research, Dr. Kaizen screamed, then no one gets to benefit from it. The energy wave that erupted from his fleet should have been unstoppable. But it met something unexpected, not just Luffy's power, but the combined strength of everyone who had chosen to stand with him. Kizaru's light barriers, Saint Bardock's reformed artificial enhancement, the Straw Hat's unwavering loyalty, the Fishman Royal Guard's determination to protect their home. Even some of the artificial Saiyans, their programming disrupted by exposure to genuine cooperation, turned against their creator. The explosion, when it came, was visible from the surface of the ocean 10 kilometers above. But when the light faded, Fishman Island remained intact, protected by a barrier of golden energy that pulsed with the heartbeats of everyone who had refused to give up. Fishman Island Palace, 3 hours later the aftermath was subdued. Dr. Kaizen had been captured, his research fleet destroyed, and his artificial Saiyan army either defeated or reprogrammed by exposure to genuine human cooperation. But the cost had been enormous. Luffy had pushed his abilities so far beyond their normal limits that he was unconscious for hours, his body struggling to recover from the strain. Will he be okay? Vivi asked Chopper for the 10th time. Physically, yes, the little reindeer replied, checking his instruments. But sharing power with that many people simultaneously, it should have killed him. The fact that it didn't suggest his abilities are still evolving. Into what? Nami wondered. Something new, Robin said thoughtfully. Something that Dr. Kaizen's research never anticipated. When Luffy finally woke up, the first thing he saw was his crew gathered around his bed, their faces filled with relief and exhaustion. Did we win? He asked groggily. We won, Zoro confirmed, though I'm not sure we covers everyone who ended up fighting on our side. Admiral Kizaru, Luffy looked around the room. Gone, Sanji reported. But he left this. He handed Luffy an official marine document, a pardon for the Straw Hat Pirates, signed by Fleet Admiral Sengoku himself. Apparently, Sanji continued, your little demonstration convinced some people in high places that you're not the threat they thought you were. And Saint Bardock decided to start his own crew, Nami said with a grin. Turns out there are a lot of former artificial Saiyan subjects who need someone to show them how to be human again. What about Dr. Kaizen? Robin's expression grew serious. In custody. But his research has been classified and sealed. Officially, the artificial Saiyan project never existed. Good. Luffy sat up slowly, testing his strength. I never want to see another artificial warrior who doesn't know what they're fighting for. So what happens now? Chopper asked. Where do we go from here? Luffy looked around at his crew, the friends who had stood with him through everything, who had shared their strength just as he'd shared his, who had proven that the bonds between people were stronger than any artificial enhancement. Now, he grinned, and it was the same cheerful expression that had convinced a swordsman to join his crew, a navigator to trust him with her dreams, a cook to follow him to the Grand Line. Now we keep sailing. There's still a whole new world out there to explore. And if we run into more artificial warriors, more government experiments, more people who think power means domination, then we'll show them what real strength looks like, Luffy said simply. The kind that makes everyone around you stronger instead of weaker. As they prepared to leave Fishman Island behind and continue their journey toward the new world, news of their victory was already spreading across the Grand Line. Stories of the Straw Hat Pirates who had turned enemies into allies, who had shared power instead of hoarding it, who had proven that cooperation was stronger than any individual enhancement. New World waters, 1 week later, the Going Merry sailed through waters that sparkled with possibility. Behind them, Fishman Island was rebuilding with help from former artificial Saiyan subjects who had learned to use their abilities to protect rather than destroy. Ahead, the new world stretched out like an infinite canvas of adventure. "Bounty update," Nami called out excitedly, waving a newspaper. "Luffy, you're not going to believe this." "How much?" he asked, though he didn't sound particularly concerned. 400 million berries, and they've given you a new title, the Liberator." "Liberator?" Luffy made a face. "That sounds too serious. Can't I just be a pirate?" "You can be whatever you want," Robin said with a smile. "That's rather the point, isn't it?" As the sun set over the new world, painting the sky in shades of gold that reminded them all of certain transformations, the Straw Hat Pirates sailed on toward whatever adventures awaited them. Behind them, they left a world where artificial enhancement was no longer seen as the ultimate expression of power, where cooperation had proven stronger than domination, where a boy with artificial origins had shown everyone that what mattered wasn't where your strength came from, but what you chose to do with it. The age of artificial Saiyans was over. The age of true strength had begun. "Hey guys," Luffy said as they watched the stars come out over the new world. "Yeah," his crew responded in unison. "Thanks for everything, for sticking with me even when you found out I wasn't really human. For sharing your strength when I needed it. For showing me that being artificial doesn't make me any less real." "Don't get sentimental on us now," Zoro grumbled, but he was smiling. "Yeah," Sanji added, "save the touching speeches for when we find the One Piece." "We will find it," Luffy said with absolute certainty. "All of us together." "Together," his crew agreed. And somewhere in the darkness of the new world, drawn by stories of pirates who turned enemies into friends and shared power instead of hoarding it, new allies were already sailing toward them. The revolution Dr. Kaizen had feared was indeed beginning, not through force or artificial enhancement, but through the simple, radical idea that everyone deserved the chance to be strong. The Saiyan Straw Hat's greatest adventure was just beginning. Man, what a journey! From a confused kid with stolen powers to someone who literally turned an entire battlefield into his crew. Luffy showed us that being artificial doesn't make you any less real, it's what you do with your strength that counts. Which moment got you the most pumped? That first Super Saiyan transformation, the insane underwater battle? Let me know in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want more crazy crossovers and tell me what mashup you want to see next. I'm always down for more chaos. Catch you later.